having a typing speed of 100 whatever words per minute is just nuts. So
Yeah.
he's pretty fast. Okay, good evening, folks, and welcome to a Sunday late edition of Literature Devil and myself. And we just happened to jump in because we had the time. And this is actually a pretty cool video we're replying to. It's Who's Afraid of Modern Art, Vandalism, Video Games, and Fascism by a gentleman of Jacob Geller. And this is actually a pretty well done video. I think the first 5-10 minutes are pretty interesting. So we're gonna watch that together, and we might pause it here and there. But it's after that we're gonna have some rather critical analysis to talk about art, about politics, and even a few little bits about some weird video games you might have heard about before. So let's get going.
Who's Afraid of Red, Yellow, and Blue was a painting by abstract painter Barnett Newman. It's 8 feet tall and 18 feet wide. It doesn't really exist anymore. There are actually 4 paintings named Who's Afraid of Red, Yellow, and Blue. This is number 3. Each one is distinctive, but they share some key similarities, namely, the title is a reference to Edward Albee's play Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. In Albee's play, 4 characters turn their lives inside out over the course of 3 hours and 68,000 words. Newman's paintings are, well, they're 3 colors. Really, they're 1 color, with some accents. But despite the simplicity, Who's Afraid of Red, Yellow, and Blue 3 hung in the Stedelijk Museum in Amsterdam for several years. And then one day, it was murdered. One day in 1986, a dude walked into the Stedelijk right up to the painting and just went to goddamn town. He gashed out about 50 feet of the fabric with a box cutter. 50 feet! That's like if he had carved out the entire perimeter of the painting. And for such an attack, he was put in jail for a while, but also he was roundly congratulated by more than a few people, because Red, Yellow, and Blue had been the subject of a huge amount of criticism since it first arrived. Before it was slashed, it was the reason for dozens of angry letters and phone calls to the museum. People said it made them physically sick.
I have to go ahead and give some respect and props to a work of art, a piece of art that can just trigger people like this. That can just inspire this amount of frustration and anger and emotion into people like this apparently did.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember my writing teacher back in the day, where I can't remember who the playwright was. This is about 1920s, 30s, and all he did was he had a production called Breathless, and I can't remember when this was done, but all it was in an auditorium, when you go to see a show with a stage, all it was a blank screen and a man with the microphone off the stage, and he was inhaling and exhaling, and he did this for about 20 minutes until everyone went hysterical outside and started breaking things and just destroying stuff. Like, it was just insane. So I can get the idea. I get the philosophy behind that, because you pay to see something and you're just listening to something that you weren't expecting, and it's not what you wanted, and everything's crazy, and oh my God, it's going to drive me nuts. So modern art is not a new thing. It's just it's trying too hard in one direction, and there's no opportunity, there's no hook to allow the audience to understand things. And yes, props to these modern artists who get paid millions of bucks to, make lines.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty simple. I mean, this particular piece was just, he's just going to experiment with a majority of color mixed in with a few other things. But that's about it. But to me, art should be well, good art anyway, should be upsetting. It should be something that makes people think. So I do really like the fact that, for some reason, it's probably because of the color red, but for some reason, this really drove people to the brink of insanity. It made them so angry and so just filled with emotion, chaotic emotion, that they just slashed it with a box cutter. They just couldn't handle it anymore. So, whatever you feel about this art piece, I think it was a success, at least on some level.
So someone finally having the balls to do something about it? To some, it made him a local hero.
This so-called vandal should be made the director of modern museums.
He did what hundreds of thousands of us would have liked to do.
Red, Yellow, and Blue 3, the painting, is dead. But I mean...
Now, since we're going to go into SAW stuff anyway, because it kind of gets there, this action seemed like something that one of these crazy leftists or NPC types would actually do. They would, they see something they don't like, they step up to it, and they destroy it. You've seen this all the time with Trump's Hollywood star, the statues, the Civil War statues, anything that resembles something they don't like. They immediately go over there and destroy it. They vandalize it, and then you have a bunch of people coming out and not condemning them, but celebrating them, congratulating them, patting them on the back, metaphorically speaking, and then saying that not only should they be rewarded and celebrated, they should be given like high up, powerful jobs because they did this. Like this guy should be, like they said here, this guy should be the leader of modern art, like the museum head of modern art. And I could see this happening, the same exact scenario happening in one of these situations. You put out a modern art piece that celebrates, I don't know, someone who happens to be white or someone who is Republican, and then that upsets one of these childish, mentally stunted SAW NPC people. They go over there and they vandalize it, and then they're hailed as heroes. They're patted on the back, and they are immediately up for all kinds of corporate sponsorships because out of recommendation from all these other weirdo, mentally stunted people. So I'm not on this because I'm not on the side of the guy who destroyed this art piece in any way. But it just seems to me like there's a parallel there. It's sort of like this parallel of people they get angry, become childish, and then there's a gaggle of people behind them celebrating them and wanting them rewarded for this act of vandalism.
Yeah, that's what it comes down to. It's still vandalism. It's still just a canvas with some paint on it. Physically, you're not hurting anyone. You don't have to take a knife to it. You don't like it, don't look at it, right?
Don't look at it. Other people like it. It's you don't have the right to go in there and slash it. I mean, I respect the initiative and everything, but you shouldn't have done that. It's not something you should do.
Yeah, regardless of whether the political climate is one way or the other, or the art is representative or modern, destroying art is not the way to go.
Yeah, and to put into perspective, I mean, I think my feelings on the current political landscape have been made pretty clear. That I do like the president at the moment. I find him entertaining and pretty effective. I don't think he's perfect, obviously, but I did like and still do like that little Trump statue, the naked Emperor Trump statue that they made, where he's like fat and all that stuff. I don't know if you remember that, but it came out during the 2016 election. Someone made a naked Trump statue, and I thought it was pretty good. I liked it. I thought it was filled with emotion. It's filled with a lot of raw energy. But I like that. So it's not about politics. It's about whether or not the piece is effective, whether or not it works, or whether or not it was the artist put their heart into it. So it's not about politics. It's more about just the art itself. It should be respected,
especially the bad art.
Especially the bad art.
We're never going to learn how to make good art. So
Who cares? It's just red, blue, and yellow. I can make those colors in Microsoft Paint. This is clearly just another example of the pretentious art world deluding itself into thinking that childish blobs of paint on a canvas are art. Right? This is a game called 2:22 AM. It's free on itch.io, made by Alice, or @Alonculus on Twitter, and in a lot of ways, it's incredibly simple. Almost bare bones. But there's something there. The game is very loosely a take on late-night television. You flip through different scenes, intercut with grainy footage of showers, or empty intersections, or dandelions, or... It makes me feel like... "2:22 AM reminds me of Red, Yellow, and Blue because, like, what is it? It sometimes feels like a horror game, but not in a conscious way. It's horror in the way a nightmare can be horror, where nothing bad happens and everything seems normal, but you know something's off. It's funny, too. It's a lot of things, but I'd be hard-pressed to tell you a theme. 2:22 AM isn't married to a specific story or even a specific sequence of events. Different playthroughs will give you different scenes with different timings. Often, there's no way to interact with a scene. Sometimes clicking performs an action, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it gives full freedom of movement, and occasionally you'll need to accomplish a task. But that task might be opening a refrigerator, or digging a grave. And it's a game that stuck with me. It kind of lurks in the corners of my brain, and those sorts of memories that could be from early childhood, or a book, or a waking dream you had during a fever. 2:22 AM made me uncomfortable. It made me think about all the other games I play, how predictable they are, how I understand the rules. It made me wonder what lies beyond the polished edges of AAA game development. 2:22 AM doesn't really fit within our existing games infrastructure. itch.io is kind of a haven for these experimental titles, but because of that, itch.io is also kind of a punchline for a lot of people dismissive of non-traditional gaming experiences.
I do like these style of games that just they kind of explore the abstract elements of gameplay, where you just walk around or you just interact with something, and because video games have a little edge on them that that something like a static painting or a prose work can't really do, is that you can interact with an environment that is dreamlike, just like he's referring to here. Like you can open up the refrigerator, there's a tree inside. You're walking around in a maze that has a foreboding element to it, like a nightmare. And I do like these sorts of games. I haven't played this game specifically that he's talking about, but I do like these sorts of games. And because the one game that immediately comes to mind after watching this little excerpt is The Beginner's Guide, and that's a very interesting and very to me a very powerful game. It's not really much of a game per se. There's not that much in terms of gameplay other than walking around, and sometimes it's a little something extra. But it's a story, it's a narration, it's seeing into. It's about seeing into someone's mind, some of the creator's perspective and their mindset, possibly through the works that they produce. And it's about interpreting what you see and interpreting what you think the creator is thinking of. And then at the end, it might be completely and totally wrong. So it's about the thoughts, about putting together the clues of each artwork and the environment and what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do. And so that's why I think these sorts of games specifically, are very interesting, especially if they tackle these abstract subjects and elements, because they have something. Games have something unique to deliver to the world of art in these terms. Because, like I said before, you can interact, you can walk around inside of it. And it's much more effective at doing that than say like a book or a 3-dimensional art piece or a 2-dimensional art piece. So I really do like these games, and I think they are important. I'm really interested
One thing about the consumption of these games, at least on itch.io, is that depending on the creator, you can actually spend whatever you want on the game to purchase. So it's not just like a $10 fee. It could be $5, it could be $2, it could be $20, depending on what you want to give the creator, if you liked it or not. And not all of them are this obscure. This is probably one of the more artsy-fartsy style things, but the argument always comes down to, is it a game? Are you playing a game? Well, it's interactive, you're moving stuff, but people are expecting some boundary, some sort of limit, some sort of understanding of input and output. And with games like WarioWare, where it's so frenetic and fast, you only have seconds to understand what the mini game is about, and it's so weird and goofy that's part of the fun, that's part of the experience. The same with the philosophy behind the Nier Automata, where the creator was like, okay, we can't have every single game or every single level of this game just be another level where you have your character and they walk around. It's a third-person action adventure, whatever. He combined all these different genres to have different experiences. So that's taking genres and mashing them together, which is very complicated to do that, not only in video games, but even especially in movies. Marvel is very notorious for doing this, usually to extreme effect, because they know how to polish the crap out of this machine that they've created. So individually, these games are fascinating, but there's only that sort of one or two layers of depth to interaction and storytelling. Sometimes there is no storytelling. Sometimes you don't have no idea what's going on, and you have to rely on visuals or audios to explain what's going on. That's the boundary. It's very, very high wall for people to get into these experimental ideas, or just, if you can call them games. Some people wouldn't even call them games. So
Yeah, that's a big debate. Yeah.
yeah, so it's interesting, it's fascinating, but we need, like, for me, I need to know how I walk, how I control. Can I change my mouse sensitivity? Can I change my perspective? Can I zoom in? Can I zoom out? Like all these basic things that I'm used to, because I'm used to building demos and games and what have you back in school. So it's like, why couldn't you just give the user the freedom to do that? And why are you always limiting to a certain resolution or a certain driver for whatever technology you're using, or a certain rendering engine or whatever? It's like, there's all these, you have the PC, you have all these available options. So experimental stuff, whether it's on itch.io or it's on the marketplace in Unity 3D, these are great things. These are great tools for learning, mostly, not for actually understanding the game. It's because the game itself is like the idea of an interface as opposed to a complete game. Now, I'm not saying all games are like that on itch.io, but there's a lot of them that are weird.
I'm glad there are platforms like these that allow for experimentation and creativity. I mean, usually these platforms are just want the best of the best, things that sell. Maybe not even best of the best, but things that are guaranteed to sell. So I'm glad that there are platforms like these.
Newer platforms like the Epic Store have promised that the titles they sell will be more strictly moderated. They'll only sell high-quality experiences. This might exclude the worst of the worst, but who decides what lives inside or outside the realm of high-quality experiences? Where do games like 2:22 AM fit in?
We have 10 or 12 pictures of art, but we don't have any penises stretched out on the table.
Thus speaks former North Carolina Senator Jesse Helms, a remarkable line that I believe should stand amongst the most famous in our nation's history. Ask not what your country can do for you, 77 years ago.
We have 10 or 12 pictures of art, but we don't have any penises stretched out on the table.
Mr. Helms is not currently a North Carolina senator. Currently, he's toxifying whatever water source he's buried closest to. But in his time as a politician, Helms was enamored with preserving the distinction between true art and deviance. In that beautiful quote, he was referring specifically towards Robert Mapplethorpe. Mapplethorpe was a photographer who took intimate pictures of human subjects, embracing men, various acts of homosexuality and sadomasochism, nudes of all shapes and sizes, and, in fact, a penis stretched out on a table. Mapplethorpe was a constant source of distress for Senator Helms. Old Jesse talked about Mapplethorpe and his photographs constantly, and I mean, Who wouldn't? Have you seen? Helms saw the photography as deviant and actively damaging to society. But he was also pretty politically canny about his opposition, and so he didn't try and get the art censored directly, just by proxy. Helms' stated target was the National Endowment for the Arts, a government program that provided money to artists and museums around the country. He argued that while Mapplethorpe's art may be abominable, what's even worse was that the American people were paying for it.
Now, this could be sort of any government subsidy, so he's just jumping on something that's a bit more sensationalistic because it is in fact art. But who is to say that the government should be funding anything for whatever purpose? It could be scientific, it could be artistic, it could be joyriding, hand out drugs to everyone. It could be anything. So there's a good argument on either case for whether or not the government should be spending money on anything. So I'm actually okay with this argument, but it's, of course, he's talking about art, so it's like, well, who cares what the money is actually going towards? Whatever artist does whatever. So maybe that would be an argument to have with the people who are part of his district who say, we don't like that. And maybe he's responding to that as any representative would do if someone has a complaint. So, not a huge problem.
If it even needs to be said, the amount Americans contribute towards that endowment is almost incalculably small. But Helms was a man of principle. He may have supported foreign death squads, but he was going to save Americans from spending that fraction of a cent on something queer, goddammit. It's Norman Rockwell and paintings of landscapes or bust. Helms was pretty talented at whipping people into a frenzy about this. And
this is during the times of, I can't remember the actual name of the group that was against all those rock and roll pieces of music or death metal bands.
Yeah.
It's the religious right, I think.
Yeah, it was the religious right, the Christianity, the people who are just the hardcore Bible thumpers, usually the Republican hardcore Bible thumpers.
And they went after Rob Zombie, I believe, and they thought there were malicious words if you played the records backward, all sorts of silly things that happened.
And they actually started doing that. The musicians actually started doing that once that came out.
Yeah, this is like imagine if video games were in the 70s and they were as popular as they are today, like you would get the same reaction. So whether it's the right or the left makes no difference. There's going to be someone criticizing something for stupid reasons, and this just happens to be one of them.
Yeah,
so
the pendulum just moved. That's basically what just happened. I once saw a really weird talk show. I think it was a clip of this really weird talk show where there a bunch of these these right-wing religious people were talking about a game that had to do with a magic wand, and then they're demonizing it, saying that your children shouldn't be playing these games because it teaches you how to use a magic wand. And they're speaking about it like as if your child plays this game, they will literally be able to use a magic wand in real life and use real magic in real life. Like you can actually start summoning demons and stuff in real life because you let your kid play this game. This is completely absurd. These people are crazy. No matter what side of the political spectrum they are.
Talked about Mapplethorpe's deviancy, people showed up in protest at Mapplethorpe's exhibits. In fact, his attacks were so extreme and effective that a museum in Washington withdrew their future Mapplethorpe showing. Almost immediately, the museum then received an angry call from Jesse Helms's office. He demanded to know why they had withdrawn. Helms wanted more than to curtail funding. He wanted those photos to be shown off. If you truly thought the art was causing damage to society, wouldn't you try to hide it from everyone? But he didn't want it hidden. He wanted public displays of anger and hugely visible protests. Wanting it to be shown off was a statement of intent.
See, this is a difficult slope because on one side it's like, well, the guy should be allowed to express himself, but the argument from the politician is like, well, that's great, but we don't want to fund it, or the American people should not be funding it. So
yeah, I mean, there are some merits on both sides in this particular situation. Like, I'm honestly more inclined with the artist on this one, but yeah, he does have a point in the fact that if it's being funded by taxpayer dollars, it shouldn't be going towards something that the politicians don't want it to go to. I mean, I don't think it should be funded at all by taxpayer dollars. I think it'd be better if for the artists if there was a way that from private donations. But that's the danger of working with an institution that is funded by the government. The government dictates what you can and can't do.
Yeah.
That's the deal you make when you sign on with something that's funded by the government. So,
So if there
yeah.
was no subsidy, the congressman would not have a First Amendment argument to make, and it would get dismissed and be like, dude, you can't make a bill that violates, the basic right of freedom of expression. That's not for Congress to decide. So yeah, it's a slippery slope especially when you have a legal backing to do so because you are funding this program. So
Helms didn't care about art. What he did want was to raise big crowds of everyday Americans, each of them representing the country's anger at non-traditional lifestyles. I have to conclude that they really wanted that exhibition in Washington, said the museum's director, Christina Orca Hall, so it would fuel their fire. I remember the first time I saw them. I walked into a dimly lit room in the Tate Modern, looked up and saw this colossus. And next to it was another one. The room was full of them, actually. I was drowning between them. It felt like... Mark Rothko's work doesn't fit very well with the typical adjectives we use to describe art. Is this beautiful? Sure, but it's not beautiful. Is this complex? It is, actually, but it's not how we think of complex. What is it? It's red and brown in chunky stripes on an absolutely enormous canvas. And yet, whoo boy, does it make me feel. I'm not unique for getting this sense from Rothko. His works hang in the most prestigious art museums on Earth. There's this gravity that I and others feel when looking at them. There's a presence. But Rothko's work, despite its acclaim, is still subversive, still challenging the ideas of what art is and what standards it should be held to. And because of that, there are people who hate it too. In 2012, a man painted his own name and a slogan in the corner of one of Rothko's massive works, Black and Maroon. He tagged it. And according to that man, he had fairly grand motivations. He said contemporary artists simply produce things which aren't creative in their essence or spirit. Art has become a business which appears to serve only the needs of the art market. A contemporary artist frequently used as an example of the medium's creative bankruptcy is photographer Andre Serrano. My favorite of his works, and probably his most famous, is...
Well, I haven't seen the rest of this video at this point, but is this guy an anti-capitalist by chance?
I did not get that. He's definitely against the right. You'll find out later in the video. He will link a lot of things to Nazism for whatever reason. It's like, no, dude, you were going so well.
Yeah, I started getting this sense that he might be anti-capitalist if he's starting to give quotes that go against the free market sort of thing. Because there is art that is in demand is dictated by the market, but that doesn't mean that people can't express themselves still. I mean, there's I can kind of see that that the overall popularity and demand might squash some things that are meaningful, some artworks that might be meaningful or actually effective, and in one way or another. But that's not a flaw in capitalism. It's just a flaw in the fact that you have to really make something that is able to speak to a lot of people. But yeah, if it's not an anti-capitalist, and I just sort of got that vibes a little bit.
Well, that previous quote was pretty much attacking those who have money can afford the expensive art, whereas the rest of us plebes can't. It's like, well, why do you care what the rich can and can't do? You spend their money on. It's like, what's the point? What's the kind of argument is that? So, not really the most important argument to have in a story about art, because who cares if you can and can't afford art? Everyone can see it. It's become news. You can go to a gala, you can go to a museum. It's always there, etc.
Yeah,
of a plastic crucifix submerged in his own urine. It's titled Piss Christ. Piss Christ was another one of Jesse Helms' primary targets. Of Serrano, Helms said,
He is not an artist. He is a jerk. And he is taunting the American people, just as others are in terms of Christianity.
For what it's worth,
I see nothing wrong with it, honestly. Urine is just a very clear yellowish color, and you're not offending anyone.
I actually kind of like it.
It looks cool, yeah. I think it looks kind of cool.
I think again, it's just because this guy is one of those. If it's the same guy he's talking about, I'm not really sure. I forgot his name, but if it's the same guy, then it's again this far right. I mean, not far right, but right wing fundamentalist Christian sort of outlook that. Yeah, they're not going to like a crucifix dunked in someone's urine.
No,
that's not gonna fly well.
It's like kind of having. I remember this joke with a buddy of mine. His dad was he wasn't a landscaper, but he was like a specialist for buying specific kinds of imported appliances. So he knew all about the internal parts of a house, but not the outside. So what he wanted to do was he wanted a Buddha statue and water shooting out of his mouth. And my friend, and these are Catholics, like, Dad, what would you want if, maybe you wanted like a Jesus statue and like water shooting out of his wounds? Like, do you think that would fly well? Same idea.
Probably get you kicked. I might actually get you kicked out of some neighborhoods in America.
Yeah, I might not.
A Jesus statue with water shooting out of his wounds.
It wouldn't look too good. So same idea. It's like, what do you do to our holy symbols is probably not going to be liked by those who revere those symbols. So,
yeah, the rule is just, if you don't want to start trouble, just stay away from religion. Unless you're expecting like some sort of confrontation eventually. Just stay away from poking at people's religion.
Good idea.
It doesn't fly very well.
I would second that. Yeah.
Serrano says he's a lifelong Catholic, that he follows Christ. Not that it mattered to the Catholic fundamentalists who attacked the photo with a hammer.
Okay, now that's interesting. So he said the artist who made Piss Christ was a Catholic. Is that what he just said?
Yeah.
Yeah. To me, that would someone who's a Catholic who follows the religions of God and or the Bible and everything, making something like Piss Christ might be poking fun or poking at the fact that religion has become such a market venture. So like a lot of people are making money on selling biblical and Christian paraphernalia. You got the books, the statues, the candles. I mean, I think there are Jesus pillows. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that's available. So he might be poking to because it's a crucifix specifically that's dunked in urine. So it might be the fact that he is pushing against or mocking the fact that the religious and the righteousness and the respectfulness has gone from the religion that he follows and has become more of a way for greedy people to make money, playing off of people's respect and love for the religion he follows. So I guess that's why I like it. It's something that you can see, something that you can interpret in several ways. So it's an effective work.
It's a creative flavor of Lutheranism, if you want to go back to when this first made a historical example of how people were paying off priests and the Pope to absolve themselves.
Yeah, indulgences and all that stuff.
Yeah, you're going to heaven if you just give me 100 gold or whatever. So I can see the parallel. I can respect that. At the same time, I'm like, well, not everyone's going to like that. Just obvious.
Yeah. It's going to ruffle some feathers.
A man who could also be titled Piss Christ is Paul Joseph Watson, a contributor.
Here we go.
Okay, now we're off the rails here.
We just jumped from religious art, with urine to another Piss Christ, apparently.
To InfoWars. Paul has political stances on many things. He speaks in front of a large map to show his worldliness and breadth of thought. One thing he's made abundantly clear is he has no time for modern art.
It doesn't enrich our culture, it degrades and cheapens society by exalting the vulgar, the crass, and the scatological.
It really depends, because we're talking about art. You're saying, okay, in modern art, a lot of everything can go. Like, a lot of everything, you're allowed to do it. So there are specific kinds which are scatological, like Piss Christ. There are a lot of kinds which degrade culture. It's true. But there's a lot which is so interpretive it means nothing. And
Yeah, it's. I mean, 99% of modern art is probably. It's not something that's worth my time.
exactly.
But the thing is about Paul Joseph Watson specifically. I used to watch his videos like some years back, like every once in a while. I stopped watching him, but then again I picked up watching his videos when he came out with his critiques on art series. I'm pretty sure I haven't seen all of them, 'cause I only saw one or two. But most of his critiques are aimed at the brutalist movement, and that's where he's coming from, is the fact that this new brutalist movement is very ugly, it's very base, and that's what Paul Joseph Watson doesn't really like. That's what he's railing against anyway, according to his own words. He doesn't like the brutalist movement because it's basically doing what, in his mind, and I can see where he's coming from, that far left NPCs are doing. They're taking beauty and attractiveness and destroying that and replacing it with ugliness. So, for example, you can equate this to the woke Marvel movement, where they're taking female characters and giving them men's bodies, making them as ugly as possible. I recently retweeted a work of art where someone redid Scooby Doo and made Daphne a hideous monstrosity of her former self.
Right.
It's basically it's a lot of woke artists. I'll just call them woke artists. A lot of woke artists out there who are taking traditionally attractive characters, traditionally established attractive characters, and turning them into these horrible looking monstrosities. There's a one that came up some time ago and became a big controversy because someone did a redraw of it. As a fact, was someone did a drawing of Samus Aran from the Nintendo series, and made her into this bald boy. But it wasn't a boy; it was still a female Samus Aran, but it was a boy. Like, it's you look at this thing that they made, and you get a sense, okay, this is a male pilot. And then someone from Comicsgate redid it. It's keeping the same essence, the more male-looking, more boyish, more gritty, and just made it more female-looking. It was still ugly, but you could see it, and you could say, okay, this person's a woman. Rather than, okay, this person's a man, but they're calling it a woman. You can see this also in the modern She-Ra remake.
Oh yeah.
That sparked controversy because the She-Ra redraw, the She-Ra that they have now, it's a boy. Okay, you look at it, that character that they made up for Netflix, and it's a boy. Your mentality comes back to you. This is a boy I'm looking at. It's a boy in woman's clothing with really long blonde luxurious hair. It is Hank Venture in a dress, and that's what you get. And so that's sort of the essence of where Paul Joseph Watson was coming from, at least in the videos I've seen, where he's railing against not just the brutalist movement by itself, but the reasons behind the brutalist movement. That they are this is movement in several forms of media that are moving against the traditional forms of beauty, moving against what we see as beautiful and attractive and pleasant to look at, and then recreating it and forcing you to enjoy things that are ugly and have no visual quality at all. But he's railing against the buildings. What he's doing is he's railing against, as far as I've seen, he's railing against the brutalist architecture and being produced by these artistic architects.
It is fairly difficult to argue against modern art because it's very interpretive by its nature. So it's almost impossible to say this is good or bad because it's not supposed to be one or the other. It's just supposed to be an expression of the artist trying to figure themselves out, and they do that through their artwork, and that's fine. But we can't really. There's no standard to apply. There's no criteria to say, well, this sculpture is clearly better than that sculpture, or this has more aesthetic value, because you're not really working in the realm of logic and facts and evidence. You're working in the terms of maybe just one aspect of art, like form or figure or shadow or whatever they're trying to do, and that's it. And maybe there is some other elements, but you can't really be against, the color red. You can't really be against a hue or a shape. So that I don't think is Paul Joseph Watson. I think that'd be anyone's argument, in really in a practical sense or in a rational sense, because there's nothing to rationalize. How can you?
Yeah. I mean, this it's kind of like they're almost playing it safe. Like, it's so you see this is the same attitude you see from modern woke movie creators, modern woke comic creators, where someone says, "Oh, this is a terrible piece of work you just produced." They say, "Oh, it's not made for you. It's not made for you or people like you. This is made for someone else, made for them. I don't know, the oppressed or the minority, what have you." And this plays into the second level here, is the fact that they start moving into artworks and art movements that are very hard to criticize, very hard to objectively say this is terrible, so that they can play into their own mentality, their own fantasy, that they are in fact great when they are in fact not. So they have to play in these playgrounds, these artistic safe spaces
Yeah,
of
like
modern art.
when we look at modern art, like say that's worth our time, like Cubism or Picasso or any of those kinds of fellows, they are applying techniques of what they've learned, like representative art, and they're twisting it around. They're looking at an object like a chair, and they're taking it from different perspectives, and they're drawing everything all at once. There are various mathematical values you can use in certain kinds of cubism, of how you take those angles apart and lay them together. There's all sorts of beautiful things like that, but there always some element of either math or representative art or color or shadow that your brain can clue in on that makes sense, as opposed to non-representative art or modern art that has no basis for reflection, that has no hook. And that is why people, I think, react so negatively to modern art, because they can't wrap their brain, they can't even put it in a box to even start to understand it. And that's why I sort of just disregard it. I say, well, that's what someone expressed. It means nothing to me. And you see, sometimes you pass by a house that has all these weird sculptures on the front lawn. It's like, where did they get this? Is this guy an artist? Did they just love it? They just bought it up and they had all this money to spend. You're just like, okay, let them do what they want. It doesn't bother me. Odd piece of lawn furniture, but that's their thing. That's their house. So I don't let it bother me. It's just I don't think that's what Paul Joseph Watson is actually arguing against. So
Yeah. Paul Joseph Watson is just arguing against what I've seen from him. He's just arguing against the destruction of beauty.
right.
That's what he's arguing against.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Paul argues that modern art is a war on objectivism. What he keeps coming back to is there is good art. We should know it when we see it. It's this guy who makes very detailed sculptures. It's not Piss Christ. It's not Barnett Newman. And by claiming that these non-traditional works are good art, what Paul says we're really doing is upsetting the natural meritocracy that art should naturally fall into. And this isn't just out of ignorance. Everyone that praises this art is doing so because of their SJW cuck ideology. Or, he says, because they've been fooled into doubting themselves by those same SJW cucks. It's all a scam. By convincing the public that these pieces are good, the artistic elite are elevating the wrong parts of art, and they're riding their deception all the way to the bank. Paul's claims that we can objectively judge art often go right along with his assertions that people creating the bad art are talented.
Okay. First of all, Paul Joseph Watson. So he just said that he's going into Paul Joseph Watson saying that you can objectively judge art, and he's trying to rail against that. And second of all, he just Paul Joseph Watson would have a point there that the artistic elite would be upholding the wrong parts of art if they were tainted by an ideology, instead of going playing off their own sensibilities and their own tastes and their own mindset and what they can take and not take from art pieces. So if you walk into a museum and you look at a piece of modern art, and you're taking your own life experiences, your own outlooks, and your own beliefs, and you're applying it to this art piece, and you're getting something out of it. That's one thing. But if you go into the art piece or look at the same art piece, and you're in the back of your mind or in the front of your mind, probably, you have the ideas of, well, who was the artist? Was he an oppressed person? Was he a poor illegal who had to sneak into this country? If you're tainted by ideology, yeah, he does have a point. That they could very well be uh, exalting different art pieces, art styles, and the different elements of art for the wrong reasons. So that yeah, he does have a point.
There are, of course, many ways to interpret art, but when you're talking about modern art, and the further you go on the spectrum between representative and modern or any other style, the less specific understanding and clear meaning to be found, and the less meaning to be found, the further you go to modern art. So you can actually compare apples and apples, like sculpture, like bronze sculpture, modern art to bronze sculpture, modern art to some degree. But beyond that, you can't really use an objective criteria. There's really nothing to work with. So I don't see why you can't use certain kinds of art, like representative art, objectively criticize that. Of course you can. We have techniques, we have understandings of light and shadow and hue and color and depth and perspective and form and figure, all kinds of elements. We can certainly do that. But when it comes to modern art, there's really no standard. There's really nothing to be taught specifically, aside from, within the case of sculpture, how do you melt glass, how do you melt iron, how do you melt copper, etc. So those are techniques to shape something, but not to give the proper shape for something, because it's not supposed to be proper. It's supposed to be whatever you want to do with it. So
Yeah.
that sort of lies in the problem. It's like, is this person just playing around with really expensive bronze and a blowtorch, or is he actually creating something aesthetically pleasing, and in what capacity, in what way? So that's why it's very difficult to interpret and give any kind of criteria to modern art. The further away you go from meaning, and the further away you go from techniques found in sculpture and painting and photography, etc.
Talentless.
It comes down to this. We have to maintain objective standards of quality and talent in order to discern the value of anything.
This is true.
Yeah.
You have to have an understanding of what makes good art. And that's why we have critics, that's why we have schools, that's why certain writers get paid more than others. That's how it goes. However, as soon as you start talking about modern art, what does that mean? How do we apply
There's no standard for them to stand on. There's no there's no baseline, really.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with you creating a giant fresco on a new building that is just one big block of black paint with a blue star in the middle that's 2 feet wide. You're like, well, what does that mean? It's like, no, it's just a blue star. I felt like expressing myself that way and getting paid 20 grand because it's a big space, and the art supplies cost a lot, and it took 2 weeks to paint.
I think the mantra of the modern artist is, someone asks them, so what does this mean? What does this art meant to represent? And the modern artist will always say, oh, it's whatever you want it to mean. No, it's not. That's really dumb. It's not how that works.
It really depends on what they're making and how they're making it and what techniques they're using. That's really all we can go on, because it could be anything. We don't know what.
Because the moment they say what it means is the moment that we can have something to grab onto and to critique it objectively. And they can't have that. They can't handle that, because the moment we can critique something objectively is the moment they lose the fantasy that they are some sort of great talent.
Additionally, when I look at any kind of work, whether it's modern or otherwise, I don't care what their intention was. I don't care about their techniques. I don't care how much money they made. I don't care how long it took. I don't care about any of that. I only care about the product. So that's where I do my analysis. I don't care if he's a student of Harlan Ellison or Pablo Picasso. It means nothing to me. So all these intentions and feelings and thoughts that they were going through, oh, he came from this background, and he grew up in Soviet Russia or what. It's like, yeah, okay, that's great.
I've seen the Always Sunny in Philadelphia episode. That's all they care about. Oh, this piece of art was this piece of art looks like trash. Oh well, it's good because this guy has a crazy backstory, and that's what they end up doing with the episode because they say, okay, here's just Charlie's crazy doodles. Well, these are terrible. Oh, you gotta wait till you hear about his life. He has like the worst life. It's like, oh, that's great then. Okay.
Talking about skill in reference to modern art isn't unique to Paul, and it's an understandable reservation to have. When looking at a monocolored canvas, it's probably occurred to all of us that I could paint that. The easy response is that almost all art takes significantly more skill than it may appear to. For instance, Rothko, king of colored rectangles, is still kind of a mystery to much of the art world. He worked behind closed doors, carefully altering the chemistry of his paints with egg, glue, resin, and formaldehyde. His variations...
Yeah, that's nothing new in the art world, okay?
Artists do that all the time.
Those are basic elements. I've seen way more complicated chemicals used in oil paints and synthetics. Eggs have been used for thousands of years. Oil is the same,
Yeah, I think eggs is one of the first things they started using.
Yeah, on frescoes. Yeah, it's nothing new.
Yeah.
So there's no magical formula that modern artists are using that the normal artists are. So
Is this guy actually against the idea that there is objective forms of criticism? Like there's something objective?
I think he's
about
trying to
art?
argue that there is an objective form of using on modern art. I think that's what he's trying to say. I think.
Well, that would probably be true because modern art is so crazy that there's no real standard. That's why a lot of people hate it so much.
between gloss and matte are incredibly subtle and incredibly hard to replicate. Newman's
Maybe the techniques of applying it, but not actually making the base. No, it's very, very common.
similarly textured his big ol' canvases in ways that created a depth of color not easily reproduced. In fact, we know how hard it is because after Who's Afraid of Red, Yellow, and Blue 3 was carved up, the restoration efforts spectacularly failed.
Oh please, give me a compressor and any color, and I'll make it a uniform color on any surface. No sweat. I'll prime a stretch canvas of any size with any kind of wet primer. It won't take long. Give me like half an hour. I can make exactly what's there.
I think a machine like an AI would produce this, like as a byproduct.
That
or
would be
something.
cool. I think they actually did that a few times. I think 10 years ago they started doing AI art. Feed it some algorithms, see what it comes up with.
Now that would be interesting.
Yes.
If it came out with this, that would be interesting to me.
It seems like it'd be easy to repaint the red part of the piece, but when the man they hired did exactly that, observers could instantly tell that something was off.
Did the man talk to the original artist and ask him how you did it? And if the guy didn't say how to do it, then obviously it's going to be different. It's like, what mixture of egg to gauche did you use, sir? I'm not going to tell you. It's a secret. Well, I'm going to guess then. You got it wrong. Oh, darn. The shade, the hue, the millions of hues of the color orange or red, it was off by, 200. It was too bright. Like, whoa.
And a lot of these artists tend to be pretty pretentious with the tools and the techniques they use, like the mixtures. I know in drawing, some of these people, especially from DeviantArt for some reason, they try to keep hidden the pencil sizes and the pen sizes.
Yeah, it's silly.
And the colors they use because it's theirs, I guess. But the artists, it's nothing new about artists hiding their tools that they use.
All the great artists that I've met, even growing up in high school, this guy I knew, he was a genius even as a kid, and he would tell me exactly what he was using. It was always the 0.3 or the 0.5 or 0.03 or 0.0. I can't remember the exact measurement of the mechanical pencil.
Mm-hmm.
And the only problem he has when he went to the 0.3, it kept snapping.
Yeah, so pretty brittle.
Yeah, but other than that, everything was all in his head. So.
The shimmering quality of the hue wasn't there. There was no sense of depth anymore. The restoration tried and failed to recreate the delicate techniques of the original.
The delicate techniques. Oh my God. The mixing of the paint is so delicate. It's just amazing.
Was it red, yellow, and blue? Sure, but it wasn't Newman.
You cannot ascribe a hue to a person, okay? Or a texture of a canvas to a person. You just can't do. It's like, oh, this is clearly not Picasso. You're using wood. Like what?
Now you can tell Picasso his style on anything. Like if you carve it into the side of a building, if you use Picasso's style, it still looks like Picasso.
Yeah, he's trying to ascribe this objective quality that no one else can represent a hue on a texture. This is his argument. Okay, give me half an hour and millions of dollars. I can get you millions of colors and shades of red, and you tell me if that's accurate.
But this whole debate, does it require skill or not, is kind of missing the point. While I'm thrilled that Paul thinks that labor is what gives something its value and should be compensated as such, reducing art to a linear connection between skill and value fundamentally just turns art into a commodity.
Okay, art is pretty much a luxury item.
Oh yeah.
So it is essentially a commodity, like buying jewelry. So you can reduce it to that, but no one is doing that. No one's arguing that. At least as a serious form of art criticism.
Art is not an essential product. You don't see a lot of like dying people in third world countries buying a lot of art because it's a thing that you can buy and afford.
Yeah, it's a
Only
luxury
when-
item, exactly.
When you're prosperous. It's not something you need.
And
It might be something good to look at, but it's not something you need.
who would spend that kind of money on something which is not beautiful? Which is the entire concept of the philosophy of aesthetics, which is all that is good, at least from Plato's perspective, or Plato's Socrates' perspective, all that is good is pleasurable, all that is bad is painful. And Plato was he was against a lot of especially music, that was against the state in his Republic. So he was big on censorship as well. So this is not an unheard of concept. So it's not some evil creation that comes out of nowhere. It's just saying, here's what we should teach people because it's effective and it shows us what is beautiful. The Greeks knew exactly what beauty was, and there's very few malformed sculptures out there in marble that I can think of in the books that I've read or seen.
Yeah, they're all. And they also had a very good sense, a very clear sense, I should say, of balance, and of not only this balance within the features of a sculpture, but balance and morality, their own sense of morality and right and wrong, and they put that in their artwork, and so we could see these balances, and we can see these techniques, and what they put into their aesthetics, and it's pleasing to the eye. Everyone loves. The Greek statues have become famous for how nice and good looking they are. People use them as descriptors to describe people they like. Oh, he had the body of a Greek statue, a Greek god.
And we can look
it works that way.
And we can look to techniques of Raphael, especially Raphael, as well as Michelangelo, on certain larger sized heads, certain larger sized pupils, larger sized hands. And that could be the argument for drawing you into the sculpture more. It could be a sign of the times, like the smaller genitalia. That was considered attractive back then. So these are all things, sign of the times, but they're constant beauty, at least of the human body. Symmetry, balance, proportion, those were all there. Those were given, and they're very few. I think the only examples I can give were the four phlegmatic, the Italian statuses of the dispositions. I can't remember the exact term, but there were the four dispositions where you show the ugly crone or the phlegmatic person who's coughing or what have you. So those were the only ones I could think of that were visually shown to be hideous, unless you look at the Renaissance time period where they show demons and creatures eating each other, the ancient Greek gods killing and eating each other. That sort of depictions. But
I was always drawn to the artwork of William Blake. His artwork tends to be a little bit more grotesque, but he has an excellent anatomy in his works.
Right, and those are fine. Those are things that you can say the content material is ugly because that's people dying or being eaten.
Yeah.
But representatively, it's fantastic because it's accurate. And it showcases what a horrible or a horror-filled story in one painting can look like. And if it wasn't representative, we'd be like, well, is this really a demon? Is this really looking like a creature that could come out of hell or whatever? It's like, I wouldn't believe it. But that's the standard that they were achieving for. They were striving for this representative goal of, if angels were real, if this were to happen, this is what it would look like.
Paul talks about how powerful the sculptures of Ron Mueck are, and I agree. I've seen this big face and it kicks ass. Mueck sculptures make me consider humans through a different lens than I usually do, making me consider my place in the species and building a strange sense of solidarity with these aggressively real-looking figures. But if someone told me that Mueck was able to make these sculptures in minutes, that actually they didn't take much effort at all, I would still have those experiences.
Yeah, again, it doesn't matter how long, how much training, what techniques. It's like, is it good art? Yes or no? How do you know that? Show us. Give us examples. Make your argument. That's all. You can't do that with the modern art of a giant red canvas with a few lines attached to it. You just can't.
It's just there's nothing to grab onto. It's something to look at, but it's not something you can really take a lot away from.
There's more meaning with the human face representatively, whether it's a sculpture or a painting, than there is with the color red.
Yeah, I mean, in the human face, there are countless little subtleties you just subconsciously pick up on. So you can have two people frowning, but they can be totally different from you. You might be able to get two completely different tones from them, even though they're both giving you the same facial expression. So the human face is how we can see each other. There's an old saying, the eyes are the window to the soul. That's that same reason, because the human face is what we connect with. So you can have 10 statues, 10 different mannequins, all having a similar facial expression. They could all be smiling. But each one of them could be portraying something different. They could get something subconsciously different from each one.
And that's not to say there's no psychology or emotion tied into colors. I believe Da Vinci created a whole book on colors and what they mean and how they affect people. If you talk to interior designers, they talk about, well, nowadays, red kitchens are hot, or blue or green bathrooms are fantastic. The way that they impact you and what you're trying to do, the functional use of these colors, why streetlights are red for stop and green for go. There's obvious examples to that, to the sun and to the green fields and what have you. I've seen blue instead of yellow on certain parts of Europe. So there are reasons why we use certain colors. But a color by itself doesn't mean anything. It has to do something. It has to be part of something. And that's why we have danger signs, hazard signs, black and white, black and red, black and yellow, bright colors contrasting with a black background. There's reasons why certain colors, there's color theory, there's why we have colors. Red, blue, and I guess yellow doesn't really do much as the painting is showing. At least to me. I'm again, this is all interpretive anyway, so.
It is absolutely impressive when an artist spends huge amounts of time perfecting an intricate style, but that's not why I experience them how I do. Feeling art, getting the... or... doesn't hinge on me knowing how hard it was to create. It's something that happens almost involuntarily.
So if it's involuntary, that means it's natural, which you can make an objective argument for having an emotional impact. And you can probably start doing that just observing the effects of a certain modern art, of whatever, color, let's say. This makes me feel claustrophobic. This makes me feel small, scared, etc. Okay, great. We can start looking at that and figuring out why. It wouldn't be very accurate in your analysis, but you'd get somewhere. The tunnel would be slightly tighter, and you'd be looking in the right direction.
And now we get into the second part of his argument. Art has to contribute to society.
Well, everything has to contribute to society. I mean, you could be a painter in the woods, but if you don't share your paintings to anyone, who cares?
Yeah, I mean, if an art piece is worth something when it can affect people in some way or another. That's why you have these famous artists rising to the top. I mean, before modern art, I mean, like Da Vinci, Michelangelo, Raphael, all these great artists like Picasso, they kind of moved to the top because their art sparks something in people, something real, something that's you can grab onto, something that they explored something of the human mentality, of human nature, of different aspects of human nature. So they contributed to society by highlighting and bringing to light these things that we don't really see on a daily basis, that we don't actually see at all. Just they kind of just stay in the back of our minds, being staying out of sight. And so and these artists and their artwork are able to bring this out and explore these ideas. And through them, you're able to see and explore the different parts of humanity that we would never have seen in the first place because we just don't pay attention to these things.
For example, one of the more famous modern artworks I recall is Man Descending a Staircase. And it's, think of an animation of a man descending a staircase, and each frame is actually painted. Or I think it's a sculpture. I can't remember if it's a sculpture or a painting. But you see each frame, to a certain degree, of this mannequin-like figure going downstairs. Beautiful. You get it. Human figure, in motion, captured in one shot. Beautiful stuff. But we get that. We get the biped. There's some man or person, thing, with two legs going in a certain direction. We get it. That could mean many things. And aesthetically, it's beautiful because it's the colors that were used, materials that were used. And well, most of us all walk, so we can relate to that.
Yeah.
It's representative to a degree. And we know the motions. We see, oh, yes, okay, we get it. Walking, of course. That's relatable on a basic level. The color red is not. Unless you're staring at the sun and you're associating red with pain or blood or something else, right? So that's the problem. The hook isn't there to allow the person to open their mind into the art, and then what they find there also might not be there. So the trick is to get into the work, and there's all kinds of techniques in storytelling of how to do that, what hook to use, when to use it, how long, and how to keep you there or to give you layers of meaning. And you can do that when there's layers to actually experience, when there's flavors to try, when there's senses to stimulate. You can't.
Yeah, and that's how they contribute to society. They help us explore these sorts of things, these sorts of elements to ourselves.
Yeah. And staring at a big frickin' wall of red, blue, and yellow probably isn't going to make people too happy. Not because they don't understand it. It's because they're curious why you're wasting their time. They can't grasp it. It's too esoteric. It's literally a wall of red.
Conceptual art is shit. It doesn't enrich our culture. It degrades and cheapens society.
And whether Paul knows it or not, he's not the first person to think of this qualification. In fact, it's very closely in alignment with a particular political ideology.
Here we go.
Okay, a quick disclaimer before...
Okay, this is about to get interesting, isn't it? This is about to get real entertaining, isn't it?
We suddenly jumped into German fascism, because why not?
Oh, man. Here we go. Okay.
Before we get into this, art is the most damn subjective thing there is. If you don't like any of the art I've talked about in this video, 100% fine. And also thank you for sticking with it this long. If you don't like anything that's been made after the year 1800, totally fine. I am not about to tell you that not liking modern art makes you fascist. However,
I'm about to tell you that liking art makes you fascist. Here we go.
But you're a fascist.
Oh God.
fascism does make strong efforts to bring art under a rigidly bordered, culturally appropriate definition.
I'd like to see Mussolini make statements about art. I really would.
There's this pursuit in fascism to make everything of an aesthetic, and that aesthetic is simultaneously mythologized or made into the history of a culture. Once that culture is appropriately mythologized, the art that feeds back into it is seen as contributing to the created society.
Okay, so a fascist nation has a mythology. Sure, I'll agree with that. Let's run with this.
Yeah, they're trying to control the narrative.
Yep. And they create their own media, whether it's
I mean,
artistic.
Hitler did that. He
Yep.
had artists picked him as like a righteous crusader and everything.
Yeah, there were depictions of the Aryan ideal, the little girl, the golden Pippi Longstocking or Goldilocks style hair girl, the Aryan man, the tough chin, the nice brush cut, the yellow locks, all that stuff. That's true. There is propaganda out there just to see that stuff. But that's like one aspect of Germany at the time. That's just the political climate of that government. So there's more to that than there's more to the German people than Nazism.
And Hitler was an artist. So would he be defending Hitler? 'Cause,
Yeah,
I mean,
and
Hitler was his own. He was an artist. He had his own style, I guess.
yes, and again, Plato talked about this. This is nothing new. If you're in power, you get to make the rules. So it doesn't matter what the rules are. It's not indicative of fascism. It's indicative of any government that wants to do whatever the hell they want.
Yeah.
When, for instance, every artist that the dominant ideology values for the last 1,000 years has been a white guy and creates things that glorify white and colonialist ideals, there's something that starts to feel natural.
I think he's just making an example. I don't think it has anything to do with fascism. There's no colonialism in fascism. There,
What fascist regime
I don't know.
was a they just spread colonies everywhere?
Maybe the British. Maybe I don't know.
I don't think they're fascist. I think
About
maybe Rome.
The
stretch it out.
conquerors. Yeah, I guess.
Stretch it out, like, from a long shot. You're gonna be reaching on that one, but
Yeah.
I don't know.
It creates a fundamental hierarchy. And any art that pushes back or simply pursues a different aesthetic isn't contributing anything to that mythology anymore. And in fact, when the artists pushing the different aesthetic are members of groups that have been historically oppressed by the dominant culture, the art they're making may feel like an attack on that mythology. Or at least, that's how it could be framed, if one had certain political motivations. One place we might see those political motivations is, Nazis.
Because of course.
Yeah, I mean,
On one hand, you might look at Nazis and see a surprising amount of respect for artists. Joseph Goebbels called artists, oh boy, a divinely gifted purveyor of meaning. High praise indeed, but as Barbara Fisher notes, as well as this being characteristic of the banal and overwrought late romanticism of the Nazis, purveying meaning was only acceptable when the meaning being purveyed fed back into the national mythology. There is little subtlety when looking at the most valued art of the Third Reich. More interesting is the fact that, as well as the galleries full of naked boys with swords, the Nazis also showed off the stuff they hated.
Yeah, so we know there was a direct connection between Greek and Roman mythology that the Nazis appropriated because they wanted to be seen as conquerors and beautiful and symbolic of being a rebirth of what it meant to be great. And then they looked towards ancient Europe, and that's what they saw. A lot of the eagle characters are reminiscent of
Rome.
The Roman conquerors and their symbols. So of course they'd have beautiful sculptures of men and women in triumphant poses.
I mean, why not? Why wouldn't you?
That makes perfect sense. Yeah.
And a gallery called Degenerate Art.
See, this just tells us that the Nazis are dumb.
Yeah.
Here's a gallery of art that we don't like. It's like, okay, why are you showing us this?
However, in today's era, I would really like to have something like this. Call it like the degenerate art exhibit.
Well, there's
I think
so
that'd be
much.
really interesting.
There's so much crap out there.
It's so interesting. Like, wow, look at all this degenerate art. Especially if I guess it depends on who it's run by. So if it's run by like a fundamentalist Christian right wing person, it would be like one set of things that are degenerate. If it's made by like more than likely it's going to be left behind like far leftist NPC.
Yeah, when I was in university and I went to fine arts class, there was plenty of nudes and depictions of pornography and all sorts of gross things. Some were great, some were beautiful, some weren't. So, what do you want to show at an open house of people visiting the university? Do you want to show them porn? Probably not. Not a great idea. Nudes, okay. Tastefully, again, there's a certain aspect of taste that you want a fine arts school to depict. So there are certain styles of art and certain depictions of art probably when you want to showcase people who'd want to come to your school. Just saying. Not saying it's ugly or poorly. There's some really good porn, honestly. Some girls spent a lot of time painting, men and women her age having sex, very visually. So, all the more power to her. So, just again, not the right subject material for an open house.
Yeah, probably not.
But in this case, with the Nazis, they actually took the art they didn't like and put them into a gala. And it's like, oh, we not supposed to like this now?
It's kind of dumb because people will obviously like it, but it's something that would fit. It fits in the fascist regime. I mean, I can imagine the regime in 1984 doing this. Here's the 2 minutes of hate. Like here's a gala of things that are made by degenerate artists and their degenerate works. So hate this, okay? Hate all of this.
Which is really, it's going to have the opposite effect just by thinking about it. If they really didn't want to have the art showcased, they would have hidden it or destroyed it. That would have been Plato's example, and there would have been
and all that stuff.
Yeah, and then Plato would have put in strong fines on the person who made it and kicked them out of the society, that sort of thing. These guys are like, hey, let's have a fun time with Cubism. It's like, dude, it's Cubism. It's it's been around for a while. The Third Reich is not going to stop an entire art movement that's been here for decades. So, not the smartest idea.
We now stand in an exhibition that contains only a fraction of what was bought with the hard-earned savings of the German people. All around us you see the monstrous offspring of insanity, impudence, ineptitude, and sheer degeneracy. What this exhibition offers inspires horror and disgust in us all.
This gallery, full of art removed from other German museums, held such deviants as Henri Matisse, André Derain, and Oskar Kokoschka. Gaze, if you will, upon deviance.
This is all Impressionism, so not everyone likes Impressionism, but a lot of people do, and that's the beauty of it. It's that connection between representative art and techniques used post-Renaissance, I believe. I'm trying to remember my art history. It's been a pretty long time for me.
If you truly thought art was causing damage to society, wouldn't you try to hide it from everyone?
No, you'd destroy it.
I like that one.
Yeah, you could hide it, but why would you? But they're not hiding it. They're literally showing it.
Yeah.
So
display. They have their own gala and everything.
They have a gala. Here, laugh at this beautiful artwork. It's like, are we supposed to?
And it's not. Obviously, it's not being shown off for the right reasons. It's not being shown off.
Obviously,
look at this artwork. It's fascist. It's a fascist mentality. They want to display and highlight and uplift art that is approved by the state, and they want to demonize art that has been demonized by the state, made by using techniques and made by people who are the unclean.
Yeah, this is
deemed unclean.
This is step one for the SJW mentality: demonize your opponent.
Yeah, it's just demon. Who knew that the SJW mentality would be very reminiscent of fascism?
But they didn't want it to be hidden. He wanted public displays of anger and hugely visible protests. This kind of art, the Nazis said, would only be made by insane and degenerate artists. Specifically, they said they must be mentally ill to create these kind of abstractions. Alongside each piece in this exhibit was the extravagant price they were bought for, inviting...
Actually, I would trust an art made by an artist who is mentally ill than I would by an artist who is just full of himself.
There's plenty of examples of artists throughout the years, especially not necessarily Picasso, but Degas, all kinds of guys that had a lot of social problems, personal problems.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it seems almost like the more messed up they were, the more interesting and like expressive their art was. So, I mean, yeah, I would, if it's mentally ill, if you're saying this artist was mentally ill and the art he's making was made by someone who is mentally ill, that's not going to be something that drives me away.
Just try to get near a person like Alan Moore and see if you want to approach him any further. It's just like, this guy scares the crap out of me.
Yeah, no, Alan Moore is crazy. He is legitimately crazy, but his art is fantastic. He is a fantastic he's a fantastic author.
I always compare him to Neil Gaiman, because Neil Gaiman looks like a nice guy, but I know he's got a little sort of twisted idea here and there.
Oh yeah, he's an angel demon sort of person. He's very nice. He's very personable, but there's a darkness inside of him. That's what people like. It's that contrast within the man.
So obviously the political ideology of demonizing your opponent has the opposite effect when he talks about art.
Mockery and anger. The gallery made familiar claims. No one in their right mind would enjoy this art. Instead, the fact that these pieces were held in high regard was indicative of the insidious plots of the left. The art held critique.
They are the left.
Yeah, they are the left.
Nazis are the
right. Yeah, right now, yeah.
National Socialism is a very far. Okay, never mind. We're gonna be critiquing what we shouldn't be talking about politics, but he brought it up, so
yeah, he did. It's his fault.
Yeah, we have to talk about it.
Critiques of the sexual norms and family values that were so important to Nazi notions of respectability. Modern art, they said.
Well, respectability has, been pretty European, regardless of political ideology. So I think you'll find that everywhere, especially in Germany. Maybe not Berlin, but Germany in general. So pretty standard practice. I guess nowadays you would call it even conservative. But family unit's kind of important in whatever flavor they come in.
Was also made for the eradication of the last vestiges of racial consciousness. New and transgressive styles by Black and Jewish artists were indicative of their degenerate intellectualism. Eugenics, of course.
Yes and no.
Yeah.
Eugenics could be seen in the Russian aspect, where it's just about breeding better babies. Not necessarily racial babies. So talking about eugenics is always a touchy subject because it directly comes to the Nazi statement, oh, you're just a Nazi if you think this way. It's like, well, there's actual proof of people being extremely healthy and then producing offspring, and then those children having the traits of those children. I remember having friends of mine in grade school. Like, we were kids, and why are you, like, gigantic? Like, why are you, like, have massive muscles? You don't work out. Like,
yeah, it's just, DNA.
Essentially, yeah. So, actually, one of my friends like that, he actually got married last year, or 2 years ago. And it's like, wow, you're going to have some amazing kids.
Through the systematic devaluation of art. A fun fact about Barnett Newman is he's Jewish. A less fun fact is that For every attack on his work because people didn't like red, many more have been specifically done by white supremacists. Who's Afraid of Red, Yellow, and Blue 4 was attacked by a man who said it was a perversion of the German flag. Another Newman, a sculpture called Broken Obelisk, was spray painted with swastikas in 1979, and last year, that same sculpture had white paint poured into its reflecting pool. Scattered around the vandalism were brochures with the 4chan pioneered supremacist campaign, "It's okay to be white."
Okay, so here we go with the 4chan. Do you honestly think a white supremacist would state it's okay to be white?
Yeah, it's a term that came out because there was so much anti-white propaganda and movies and all this stuff. And then 4chan kind of, I'm not sure if it came out of 4chan or not, but 4chan it's a troll site. If they can upset a bunch of people, they're going to upset a bunch of people, no matter what it's going to take. They are the black hat trolls. They will do things that will make you upset, even if it takes them vandalizing something, or going to some extreme. Like if it takes an extreme act, and if that extreme act will upset a lot of people, they will do it.
Yeah, to tie this in with white supremacy is just ridiculous, but he just stated it as if it's a natural progression of people originally vandalizing this thing that were white supremacists, and then
It's white supremacists.
and then 4chan did it. It's like,
Just because they have something that says it's okay to be white doesn't mean they're white supremacists. I mean, if someone said it's okay to be black, you think they're black supremacists?
yeah,
It's not how it works. It's because white people were being demonized everywhere.
yeah.
That's why that phrase came up. It's not because they're white supremacists. And then he brings up 4chan. Like, which one is it? It's not the same thing. 4chan is not a white supremacist site. They are a troll site.
Yeah,
So
it's
is
like
it
saying everyone
trolls?
on Twitter is a troll. It's like, well, no.
And there are trolls on there.
They are, yeah,
but,
for sure.
It's
Yeah.
not a platform. It's not a troll platform. Just like a 4chan is a troll platform. It's not a white supremacist platform.
It's
That's
an
be either
anonymous thing. How do you tie that in? You can't, like, everyone's anonymous. So wait a second, anyone can just be whomever. It's like, yeah, then what's the point? How do you properly associate a group with a bunch of people who are all anonymous? It makes no sense.
Yeah, and the only reason why they might look like white supremacists is because the far left has made white supremacy, which is a non-issue in America. I mean, there are really no white supremacists in America. Maybe like there's a handful, but they have ramped up the idea of white supremacy and white power and all that
Yeah.
stuff to such a extraordinary degree that even the mention of white people in any sense of the word triggers a lot of people. And so 4chan, being a platform dedicated to trolling, would see this and say, okay, time to be white supremacists. And
Yeah.
so that's what they do. They're trolling they're trolling people like the far left with white supremacy and actions that appear like white supremacy because the far left is so triggered by it. It's the hair trigger to them.
That is like the ultimate version of racism on their eternal quest to, like, on CNN, to just talk about anything racist. The president's racist. This right winger is racist. Oh, well, not only is he racist, he associates with white supremacists. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
I've heard that
Yeah, he
rhetoric in Canada. I've heard it in Europe. It's getting silly. Okay.
Racism. That's all they come out with. It's ists and phobes. It's all about. It's all about.
So no, 4chan is not a bunch of white supremacists. No, they're not.
They are trolls.
They're
okay?
not advocating for whiteness or whatever. They're just poking the bear. Okay.
Whether they know it or not, the fact that white supremacists hate Newman's art.
Who cares about white supremacists?
I can't believe he's.
No one
I still can't
cares.
believe he thinks 4chan is white supremacist. This is. He's on YouTube. He's been on the internet before. Does he not know about 4chan? I have a lot of trouble believing this. This is ridiculous. This is ridiculous. Like, this is quite frankly, this is completely and utterly unbelievable that he doesn't know about 4chan, and he's being on the internet at the same time. I don't understand.
Fits right in with a message he always said he wanted to convey. In 1990, he said of his art, "One of its implications is its assertion of freedom. If it were read properly, it would mean the end of all state capitalism and totalitarianism.
Okay, this is a really dumb thing to say. If you only interpret my art, which is supposed to be interpretive,
it's
the
an
way that I
interpretive piece.
think, it would end. It would end capitalism and economic system.
You see what I'm
And
talking about? The fantasy, this fantasies people live in.
yeah, I don't. Is this the artist talking? I think it is.
I believe so. I believe this is a quote. If this is his quote, he's back in that they live in these people who produce these sorts of artworks, these interpretive artworks. They live in these fantasy worlds where their art is the most powerful piece ever produced by mankind because they're so interpretive, and you can't really deny it. It's kind of like the is God real question. You can't. There's no proof for it, but you can't really disprove it. I can't really prove that your art is bad. I can't prove that your art is good either.
Well, just think about this. What he's actually saying. If everyone just understood my art, everyone 100%, it would end state capitalism, which I believe is corporatism. I think that's what he's referring to. There's no such thing as state capitalism. Just like the freedom of the private individual to then be owned by the state doesn't make sense. So it has to be corporatism and totalitarianism. What is he talking about? What totalitarianistic state in America?
It's just this fantasy. I have no idea. It's just this fantasy that he's come up with. There's some sort of oppressive regime out there, and his piece is so great
Powerful.
and fantastic and powerful.
Like-
That only if the lesser beings, the plebeians, could understand it, it would destroy and topple these
the
regimes.
color red.
The color red. Oh, please.
Maybe if he had like a nuclear bomb and it was blasted into space and you saw this big red explosion,
If we turn a nuke into the color red,
like it's artistic. It's not a bomb. It's really color. It's like, what? You're psycho. You're nuts. That would have more impact than a painting. Just so you know how changing people's minds, violence really works well.
oh yeah.
But don't go off and do it, guys. Okay.
Not just the color red though. I mean, I need some context here.
Yeah, please. You have a story. You have a manifesto with that color red, please.
Challenging our preconceived notions of art means challenging our preconceived notions of institutions, of society.
Institutions, really. I'm gonna look at a boy in blue and go, I don't know. We gotta change our military institution. We need some blue fatigues here. Blend well with everyone's from Earth. It's the blue planet, so
It means the right shade of blue and the right hue on the right texture
yeah.
for it to work just right.
Got to have that wave algorithm so they're camouflaged in the sea.
No, I didn't take art specifically, but I've taken art classes both on the high school and college levels, and they didn't. When I assume institutions, I assume it's something along the institution of academia, or somewhere along those lines. And as far as I know, the colleges and high school courses, they don't teach you what is right and what is wrong. They teach you techniques and how to create art. They don't tell you like you have to produce this sort of thing. Maybe individual teachers do, but I have not seen the standard curriculums being your students have to create this one piece of art or it's wrong.
It depends on the school. If you go to an actual art school, you can go for a degree just in technical aspect, and then there's the actual whatever aspect of art you want to take. So technical would be computers and making things, whereas you could study to be a certain kind of painter, sculptor, that sort of thing. If you go to like the university level, it's more general, so there'll be art history, color theory, the general first year course, and then you go to the second year, you'd specialize. So that hasn't changed.
But if he is talking about something other than the academia institution, and he's talking about the status quo, or talking about what is traditionally accepted or is traditionally praised, then I would agree with him on that. That good art tends to poke fun or mock or just commentate on the societal status quo at that time. So that to me would be an effective artwork.
Yeah, but not the color red bringing down the Republic. It's like, what?
Totalitarianism,
What are you talking about, buddy?
state capitalism, or something.
Viva la revolution! Everyone start painting red.
Dude, this color red, it's a lot of red, a little bit of yellow, a little bit of blue. It might look like just three colors together, but if you interpret it just right, it'll take down capitalism. Yeah, I'm not getting that vibe at all.
Nope, sorry.
This kind of art doesn't fit into the cultural narrative, and because of that, it becomes a target.
Also, and see what we mean. As soon as that guy, the artist, gave us an explanation behind his art, now we can start judging it objectively. And now his fantasy is revealed to us, and that fantasy begins crumbling to pieces.
Yeah,
It's just that way.
trying to rationalize, trying to use your logical brain to figure out modern art is already the wrong technique. You have to turn it off, okay, and just appreciate whatever aesthetics you can pick up visually, audially, whatever the art is. That's it. Just appreciate aesthetics. It's the romantic side of analysis. It's not critical analysis. You can't use critical analysis in those ways. You have to see pure aesthetics. Color, light, shape, form, figure, all that. And if it's not there, then even you are going to have a hard time interpreting whatever. Like, if there's no aesthetical value, you're like, this is nothing to me. This literally means nothing.
I mean, what happens like 10 years down the road and you forget why you made this painting?
Yeah, I forgot. Sorry.
I forgot. So you can't look at it and remember why you did it. It's not really all that effective, is it?
Yeah, I guess not. Hard to say.
And ultimately, the crime that these artists commit is the right's biggest fear.
The right's biggest fear? How did we get from Nazism, which was a leftist
That's a big jump.
leftist political ideology, sort of hating on everything that came before it, and now we're attacking the right? Is that because of Paul Joseph Watson? I don't know.
It's big. It's a big jump. All of a sudden, this is the right's biggest fear. If he went from, he just finished saying that these artworks challenge the status quo of the institution, and if he is saying that it is challenging the status quo, the societal status quo, it's in that, even if it's in that layer, it's not against the right wing, it's against whoever is in power. So it's not the right wing's fear, it is the person in power's fear.
We're assuming this is the state institution, not the fine arts institutions. So,
Yeah.
every Western world political government, so the Westminster parliamentary system of Canada is being challenged by the color red, and state capitalism is bringing it down. What?
Only right wingers are afraid of art, I guess. I don't know.
The conservatives. Oh no, the deadly PC party.
Because as we know, there have been no artists or any sort of creatives in the history of mankind who have had conservative or right-leaning views on anything. There are no, absolutely 0% of people who are right-wing have any sort of creative endeavors. They don't exist. Yes.
They are upsetting the hierarchy. They are taking themes, experiences, and emotions that don't fit into our nation's narrative, and they are expressing them in a way that is impossible to ignore.
Impossible to ignore. I didn't go to the art gallery. I didn't turn on my TV that day when the nature of things wanted to talk about fine art or whatever.
I never saw it, so I ignored it pretty well.
Yeah. I don't even know if there's any white supremacists in Canada. Maybe. There could be. I've never heard of them. We joke about that, how Andrew Scheer invited them to talk years ago. He's our next political right-leaning fellow up against Trudeau this election year. But we don't know who he was talking to, if he were. So is this a modern take on white supremacy? It's certainly not in Canada. Maybe the States, maybe Europe. I don't know.
And thus, the rejection of non-traditional forms of art so often boils down to a rejection of oppressed people within those mediums. Nazis didn't call Kokoschka a degenerate because of his artistic stylings. They did it because
Okay, they have like all these pictures of KKK members, and it's boggling to me that the far left are the people are creating the art, so much of the art having to do with the Ku Klux Klan. Like the Ku Klux Klan, the best thing that ever happened to them is the far left NPC crowd. They're getting so much recognition and media attention, and their likenesses are being produced in art, and their likenesses are being hung in museums all over the world because of the far left NPC crowd. Never before have they had this much power in the media because these weirdos have given it to them. Because the Ku Klux Klan is nothing in America. There's like a few thousand in all of America. They're not very big. They're not a very big group anymore. They don't have that much power, if they have any power at all.
It's bizarre. I'm not sure what angle he's going with to tie it into racism, and now that they're somehow far right. It's like, isn't racism usually associated with the far left in American history? Like it's
The Democrats, the Ku Klux Klan was started by Democrats. It was started by the Democratic
right.
Party.
That's why I'm like, why is he talking about the far right? I don't think that's ever been a thing.
The Ku Klux Klan specifically, they started going with the Republican outlook and the far right outlook.
When you
yeah,
when you listen to Malcolm X and all these other black advocates for freedom, they hated the left. They didn't like the left at all, because the worst thing that the black man is a white man advocate for the black. I can't remember the exact quote by Malcolm X, but it was eventually saying that they're fake friends.
you shouldn't go with the Democratic. But now, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party used to be the opposite. So you kind of switched more or less in their views since the early days, but the goals have remained the same, except the Democrats no longer use chains. Now they use welfare. They still have this. They basically they change the surface, they change their face, but they have the same goals. They want the Democratic Party still want to be able to control people through some means. So now no more chains, in with welfare, and
Right. I remember
public
that
services
there was I can't remember the name. He's a black radio announcer, and he was looking at the 8 years of Obama, what he did to Chicago, and the lack of support he provided his state and his city, and compared to Donald Trump, who's been loved by the blacks for the past 30 years.
He's doing a very good job. I think he has an Ellis Island Award.
Really?
I think so.
Jeez. He invited all these minority groups to the White House. They talked, and it's like this is good. This is what you should be doing. You should bring people from the country together and talking about their problems. How else will he know, unless he hears it from the horse's mouth, to bring these people in? Very odd that they're tying these two groups that are completely separate together. I don't know where that's coming from. Again, I'm not American. Maybe there is a connection between the far right and the KKK. I don't know.
There is because it's mainly because the Ku Klux Klan, they act kind of like a militia. They like to have power, so they like guns, they like control. They are very attached to the Republican Party in some respects, because the Republicans are the ones saying, okay, we need to uphold laws. We need to not have illegal immigrants flooding into our streets. So they have that. They tend to have the isolationist view. They tend to have more of a high view on upholding laws and things like that. It's not racism. It's more like we need to have order here, and the Ku Klux Klan latches onto that because they take that. They kind of identify that with control, and they want to control, the races of people, all that stuff. So that's kind of why they attach to them. It's not because the Republican Party is racist and stuff. It's mainly because the Ku Klux Klan lacks their lot is much better with the Republican Party in power, because they get freedom on guns, they get freedom on several other things, and right now, especially, the far left is the one trying to take away people's guns, trying to take away people's right to free speech, all that stuff.
I just posted in the channel was a post by Larry Elder, and I just watched him with this video about Trump and what he's been doing and how he compares to Obama and what have you. And it was just illuminating. Like all these people are saying, Obama was great for uniting the black people, or
He
Trump
did
is
not.
Trump is dividing them. It's like no, just pretty much the opposite.
Yes, the opposite. Well, Obama did nothing for 8 years. He did absolutely nothing except fail at everything, and everything he touched became a disaster. And I think he had to backstab a country in order to have America take credit for the capture of Osama bin Laden. That's how he got his election second time election win.
It's interesting because as a Canadian, I'm not too involved in American politics. Yeah, I get Twitter feeds and posts on my phone here and there, but I'm like, okay, I guess he Trump said something racist, and you actually read the quote. It's like he didn't say anything racist. What the hell is this?
That wasn't racist at all. Like, you have to listen and read Trump, and actually listen to his speeches, and you see that that's not too bad. That's actually pretty good. It's inspiring. And then you hear the news outlet, and they say, he said something racist, and they have a little tiny clip to support it. So it's been going on. That's been going on with Trump since before he was president. When he was running for president, they still did that.
Yeah, I remember I used to get CNN on my TV before I turned off paying for it. I was paying for CNN. What the hell? And so I get no news on American politics unless it's like Twitter or someone tells me, and I don't really care. So it's like, okay, fine, whatever. Trump is just saying whatever. Trump is just a reactionary. He just says whatever he wants. It's like, okay, yeah, maybe he'll screw up here and there. Sure. I really don't think he's a horrible guy that people make him out to be.
If you read what he's done in the past, he actually has some very, very interesting things. I mean, he's a billionaire, so he wouldn't really care about things. He wouldn't think he'd care about things.
Yeah, of course.
But he does. He has a long history of helping out people and doing good deeds. Now, if Bret Easton Ellis came out with American Psycho and Patrick Bateman idolized Trump because a lot of people in Bret Easton Ellis's life idolized Trump because in both their eyes, he was this the top dog. He was this sociopathic kind of guy who did whatever he wanted and made money doing so. And I'm not going to admit that. I'm not going to say that Trump is an angel, but he's not a demon either.
Yeah, the Larry Elder video that he interviewed, or he talks to, or did he read an article? There's this actual journalist who's been covering Trump for like 15 years or so, and if there was any dirt to dig up on him, she would have found it by now. Like this is how involved she was.
She was obsessive.
Yeah, so it would have popped up by now. And yeah, there's all these little sound bites and little things that
Yeah, I'm not saying people should like Trump or anything. I'm just saying that it's not as clear cut as the news is making it out to be. He's not this demon of a person.
Yeah,
okay, he's a human. He's a man. go figure, right?
Yeah. What would a really rich guy that sits on top of his billionaire building say off the top of his head? Well, that's what he says. It's pretty much how you would think.
He's besides the billions of dollars. When you talk to the man, or when you hear him speak, he sounds and acts like a regular American person. He doesn't seem like a robot politician. I think that's why people kind of relate to him more, or kind of see themselves voting for him and liking him, because he's an American. He's like a ordinary American person that just so happens to have earned billions of dollars. Now it's hard to relate to him in a lot of other ways, but the way he speaks, the way his opinions on things, the way he moves and everything like that, it's very familiar to even the lowliest American, economically speaking.
That's nice. Well, we're gonna go back to the KKK and the far right.
Back to the KKK.
Yeah, see where we're going with this.
Because of his public anti-fascist activism, white supremacists didn't
Anti-fascist activism. I had no idea that was a problem in the modern world. But
it isn't. It is a fantasy built by the NPC left. I mean, no, not necessarily. Maybe there is fascism, but it's coming from the people who say they're anti-fascists.
Wow, who saw that coming? Huh? There is no fascism. We're against it. But okay.
I guess they're kind of capitalist. There's no supply of fascism, so they're stepping in to supply it.
That makes sense.
Vandalize Newman's work because of the apparent simplicity of his art. They did it in an attempt to show.
You know why white supremacists didn't vandalize his work? Because white supremacists didn't vandalize his work at all. it was 4chan.
That would make more sense.
According to this person, it was 4chan. He even said it was 4chan.
And by
4chan is not
vandalism,
a
they
white
took
supremacist.
a printout and they stuck it onto the metal there.
Yeah,
That's,
what is? I guess this person would still think it was white supremacists if instead of it's okay to be white, instead subscribe to PewDiePie. I think you come to the same conclusion. It's white supremacy. This is the byproduct of white supremacy.
it's okay to be subscribed to PewDiePie.
It's okay to be subscribed to PewDiePie.
Who in society actually held power, and saying that a half decade of rape, bomb, and death threats were
Here we go. Fez creator. If you don't go all these video game stories,
Oh man,
they're
Fez creator.
they're hilarious. I'm not going to go through them all, but
I don't dive into them, but I do know the Fez creator
Oh, God.
controversy.
Felicia Day is just someone who's reads her tweets too much and is paranoid when she walks out of her house. Sarkeesian,
What's her
you know.
name? What's her name? The comedian Sarah Silverman. She was the comedian who took a picture of this construction marker and said she saw a swastika. And everyone was like, "This is a construction marker. It's not a swastika." You- these people are these. I mean, these people are unlikable. I would hate to be them because they're apparently afraid of everything. Like they see a construction symbol and think it's a swastika. They walk out of their house and think they're going to be shot by some MAGA hat wearing lunatic. It's just not reality, but they're afraid of it. They're afraid of the
Because
fantasy
game-
they've created.
Yeah, it's just strange to. He's going to tie in video games. Let's watch this.
Fantastic.
gamers were angry about journalism and a series of video
No
essays.
wonder gamers are so terrified of them subverting the video games industry.
Depression Quest isn't a new
Here we go. It's Depression Quest time, guys. As you can see on the left-hand side, by Zoe Quinn. Yay!
Oh, great. This is going to be
kind of game. Text-based adventures have been around forever. They're
Kind of game, double quotes.
one of the oldest genres in gaming.
Text adventures are one of the oldest genres in gaming. You know, if Zoe Quinn actually made Pong, like, instead of Depression Quest, I still wouldn't be impressed. Even if it's one of the oldest genres in gaming. It would be a step up from HTML, but
Yeah, I mean, this doesn't matter how old the genre of gaming you're playing
Yeah.
around in. It's the quality of the game you're producing.
I mean, HTML hyperlinks is not a game, guys. I don't know if you guys didn't know that. It takes about 20 minutes for me to teach you how to do HTML with hyperlinks. And publishing a visual novel with very small visuals is not like she's not competing against the Japanese marketplace here.
It's like competing against. No one wants this. It's just there's no competition.
No one wants this.
Yeah,
There's,
she had to sleep with journalists in order for this to get any sort of recognition. And isn't it kind of telling that someone who is of the far left NPC crowd made a game called Depression Quest? Like, of course they did. Of course she did.
and there's nothing wrong with actually creating a story that's a choose your own adventure style text adventure, which happens to involve HTML. That's fine. You can do that. But it's going to be very niche. There's really no standard, well, aside from the Japanese, to compare to, that they've been churning out visual novels for years on years. And, you know, you're not going to make a lot of money. It's going to be a labor of love. It's going to be, maybe she is depressed. Maybe the writer was depressed. And that's it. The same way these other artists doing modern art have a feeling and they got to express themselves and get it out of their system.
Yeah, there are still quality and interesting and very fun text games being produced today, and there's some on Steam. In fact, I recommend Diabolical. It is a text-based game where they give you like a scenario, like what happens next, and then you get a bunch of selections and you choose which one you do. So which action you do, and this Diabolical is about where you're a supervillain and you just go through the different scenarios and you just act like a supervillain. It's pretty fun, and It's interesting because it really highlights the fact that text adventures allow you to do more stuff. It has fewer limitations, so you can go to one thing to another, and it takes less programming. It's just solely based on story, and there's several like that on Steam. So it's not about this being a text adventure. It's about this being, well, awful.
Yeah, it's a bad. If the game judgment is based off the story, it's a bad story. So you can't really gauge clicking a hyperlink as gameplay. I mean, technically you are interacting, but that's it. That's all. Like, you can download free games like this on the App Store, and there's RPG games like that where you're technically playing an RPG, but it's not actual mechanics of RPG. It's just you're playing a role, and you're going to hell. You're part of some medieval fantasy world, etc. So there are all kinds of genres out there, but they're just story based, and they're way more entertaining than, gee, my life sucks. I can't tell people how sucky it is. Blah 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 blah.
And this is the usual arrogance and self-indulgence you get from the NPC crowd. It's all about them.
Yeah.
It's all about the way they feel and the way they.
And there's
they want
absolutely
things to
no
be.
way anyone who's depressed would go, "Wow, I'm really happy I played this game."
Depression Quest.
I've heard of people who were depressed over real life scenarios, like people dying, who played like Mass Effect, and they could relate to the aliens and the humanized characters in those stories, and it held. There were so many stories of that. That's why people loved Mass Effect. I remember, like, what does Mass Effect mean to you? And all these people who were young adults or becoming adults, who were getting through hard times, say, I played Mass Effect 2, and I could relate to Miranda, or I could relate to Tally, because of what happened with their dads. It's like, wow, okay, cool. Like, that's representative art, AAA title, voice acted. There's emotion there.
Yeah.
With this, there's no voice acting.
It's just
You're
texting.
You're reading.
Text. I assume it's just about her depression, like her I guess struggle with depression, and then how indulgent this game is, like how she is the most victimized person in the world. I assume. I obviously haven't played this. No one has played.
No one has played this. No. We're all in the dark, and I'm pretty happy to be in the dark with it.
Depression Quest is an interesting title because it uses those implicitly understood rules of the genre to subvert our expectations.
Oh my god.
Is he critiquing Depression Quest as a work of fine art?
First he said it was interesting. It's an interesting title. It's like, thank you, Mr. Generic. And it not only is it interesting, it's subverting our expectations of the genre. What expectations of the genre were you having?
Subverting. Wow.
Well, it has no voice acting. So.
It's called Depression Quest. How is that subverting my expectations from text adventure genre?
I remember playing in the 80s text adventure games like Robinson Crusoe. Not Return to Zork. All kinds of weird adventure games, like we had to key in verbs and nouns. Pretty tough to figure out what to do.
I've heard of those. I didn't play those, but I've heard of them.
Yeah. So,
and I think this guy might be in the school of it's subversive, therefore it has merit and it's good, and that's not necessarily the case. Last Jedi being a prominent example of how subverting your audience's expectations doesn't mean it's good.
Well, I'm not sure what he's going to say about it, but I just know as soon as I saw this, I had to stop. I was like, oh god, I can't go any further. Get LiteratureDevil on this. I was like, okay, let's do it.
As you play through the life of a fairly innocuous main character struggling with depression, options.
Oh, he actually said it. He actually said the phrase, "Subvert our expectations." That's just gold. Awesome.
Amazing.
By the way, that's how I know something is going to be terrible, when they have to describe it as subverting your expectations. And that's the main marketing tool they use. Oh, it subverts your expectations. Well, I'm not taking a look at it because that to me says it's terrible.
Yeah, the other side of that is that the person has no imagination, and it's like, wow, I wasn't expecting this to have a white background. It's like, what? Subverted my background expectations. Like, yeah.
Expectations subverted. Therefore, this is top-notch AAA gold.
This font is not Times New Roman. My God, it's killer. It's breaking new ground.
Surely it must be Calibri.
Oh,
It's not Calibri either.
it's
This
Fontana,
is genius. It's Comic Sans.
not Comic Sans. No.
Present themselves at the bottom of the screen. Your significant other has invited you to a party. What do you do? But time and again, the most desirable option, the choice that would help win the game,
That's called the strikeout feature in HTML. In case you guys are ever curious what this is.
She slept with journalists for this?
I don't know. I don't want to know.
Why?
I don't know. Don't answer these questions.
Come on. Have some self-respect.
I can't. We're still talking about this years later. Oh, okay. We're good.
is X'd out. It's clear that the best option would be simply to go to the party and enjoy yourself. But you can't do that. Every decision is managing compromises, doing things that you know aren't ideal, but it's all that's available to you at the time. And at the bottom of the screen, where you'd have your character stats, they're just 3 lines.
See, this is, to me, is bad game design. You're not allowing the player to do what they want to do because you crossed out the first feature of as if you're like teasing the player. It's like, no, you can't never do that. There's no way you can do that.
I guess it's kind of exploring. I guess you're trying to explore the, like, there's an option there, but your depression won't let you take that
Maybe
option.
there's like a new game plus where it opens up, but
It's DLC.
download this HTML pack
All right,
with
let me,
JPEGs.
Let me get some Depression Quest DLC. It's something that's worth spending my money on.
with a flash bar which pops up and shows you an animation. Like, okay.
But even if it's just options, giving you the several options for a non-idealistic scenario, it's not really unique to Depression Quest. That's something that's been in video games for quite some time. Especially, even when this game came out, it was something that's been in video games for quite some time. You don't always have the best scenario to choose from.
Yeah, you have to get stronger. You have to
Great
get
drama.
You have to get a weapon. You have to get the key. You have to go around the problem. You can't pass it yet. Yeah, there's lots of stories of gameplay.
I think they even had this in Mass Effect. I mean, there's like I think there's one part where if you don't do something correctly, someone dies.
Yep.
You know, there's always scenarios there's always scenarios where the options available aren't going to be the best ones.
Yeah, but you're apparently have emotional blocks on you as a person, so you can't just tell your girlfriend who loves you and wants you to have fun with her, yeah, I want to go have fun with you and love you and be with friends because I'm depressed. It's like, okay. Weird person who has a loving partner.
You are depressed. You are not currently seeking a therapist. You are not currently taking medication for depression.
Jesus, holy
Wait,
crap.
what? Those are the options?
That's your status.
Oh, it's your status. Okay.
I wonder if there's
Even if you are depressed, how come you can't choose the scenarios that are available? I mean,
is there like multiple therapists and you go to the wrong
like
one?
in this scenario, there is presuming that there is no way you'd have the will or the mentality or the fortitude to fight against your own depression and make the correct scenario that you know is correct. It
yeah,
might be difficult.
I would imagine that you can get out of your depression if you choose the right options, but you can't because they're crossed out. So I don't get it. Like, what's the point?
Yeah,
You
can you come back
die?
later to take some medication? Can you choose to take medication? I mean, that's the game aspect here. You can make choices. So can I start taking medication? Come back to the scenario and pick the one
It would have to be where you actively, because that would annoy the crap out of me if my status is like you're poisoned. It's like, okay, where's the antidote? Where's the antidote? I still can't. Where's the antidote? I can't. I'm dead. What? Like what?
I think it'd be a lot more interesting if instead of telling the player that, hey, you're depressed, you're not taking medication, what if you start off the player with like a depressing scenario? What if your husband or wife just died, or what if your dog just died or something, and you can kind of realistically, like for real, feel some sort of depressing emotions, and then you can go through this like, okay, I don't want to do this. Like, you have some scenarios, you have some options here, like, okay, my family member just died, a close family member just died. Would I really want to do this, or would I probably want to do this? And so you can choose what kind of person you're going to be, what kind of person you're going to play. But instead, this game just tells you who and what you are.
Not too many locus of control on the player there. Not too many agency giving the player freedom to do what they want. It's like, no, you're depressed, period. It's like, ooh.
And this mentality, it's like, there's no way anyone in the whole world can fight against this. It's their mentality. So it's this collective mentality, collectivist mentality that, oh, you can't be different. Everyone of this color of skin is oppressed. Everyone of this level of job hates their job. And it's, if you belong in a category, you belong in a category, and you uniformly have a certain mindset, mentality, and skill, and like a will level. There's no other options.
Well, we know that this person's depressed because of the patriarchy, so there's no escape. So, that's just the story there.
It's a brilliant little experiment.
It's brilliant.
It's brilliant.
Totally just mind-blowing.
This is what you call brilliant?
That HTML is just blowing my mind. I just can't believe it. That CSS control with the gray background on the status messages, just totally, wow.
I want you to sleep with journalists. I get this up there. This is not brilliant. This is an ordinary. This is a standard game about exploring this sort of side of.
I'm kind of scared of the Polaroids too. I wonder what the hell that means. Like, is some guy like taking Polaroids?
I have no idea.
Was he walking around?
Someone took a Polaroid of their cell phone, I guess.
Yeah.
Do depressed people do that?
How weird are you? Why do you need a phone or a camera for your camera phone? I don't know what you're doing. Whew.
A game that plays with the established power fantasies of most role-playing to put you in.
What role-playing? Since when was a role-playing genre indicative of the visual novel?
I mean, a lot of these role-playing games that you play as they kind of lead you into your role. This one just starts off with, okay, this is what you are. You are a depressed person. You're not taking medications. You're not seeing a therapist. Okay, it's kind of just thrown on you. You're not led into this role where you can kind of get into the shoes of this person. You're just handed this role. Actually, it's forced upon you.
Yeah, it's kind of like Chekhov's gun is constantly telling you, I'm a gun, I'm a gun, I'm a gun. Can I use you? Nope. No.
I mean, if you look at Dragon Age, for example, that was a very good RPG. And it starts off with you being ordinary. You are living your ordinary life with no matter what you choose, and then you're kind of led into this role that you will eventually take on. And it's effective because it lets you have time to develop your character. You get to see and feel how they are before they become this hero. And then once the time comes where they become this hero, it's easy for you to have developed and then mentally evolved with your character, and you alongside your character are both stepping into this role because you connect. This person has become you. You have become this person. So that's how this becomes effective. This is not brilliant because it just thrusts things on you. It would be more brilliant, I would say, be closer to brilliance, if it led you into the shoes of someone who is like this, someone who is depressed, someone who is in the mentality of being depressed but not wanting to see a therapist or take any medication to fight that depression.
We'll assume that the statuses in the game change because why else would they be displayed there? And
kind of have to be.
Yeah, so.
I think it'll be a little bit more effective, a little bit closer to brilliance if we start off with, you are a well-adjusted person and you are not taking any medications and stuff, and then your status changes as the scenarios pop up. But if this is the first scenario, it's just you just thrust into this role. You don't have time to connect with this person or mentally change with them.
Yeah, you need context. You need to know what's going on. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that'd be at least a little better.
In a situation where you're undercut by mental health at almost every turn. It's a challenging game, though not in the traditional sense. There are
It's a challenging game, but only if you're a moron.
Yeah, well, I guess I have to take his word on that because I haven't played this, but it
Well,
doesn't seem like it would be any sort of challenge.
is an adventure game challenging? Yeah, it's a puzzle game, but every game is a puzzle game, is a logical thing you have to solve. So, just not in the traditional sense. Like, okay, how bored do I have to be? How dumb do I have to be? It's like, okay, click on this option. Oh, I'm still depressed. Okay.
Game overs per se, but in many of the situations, every option feels like a losing one. We're hardwired to want to succeed in games like this, and Depression Quest makes it feel like that's just impossible sometimes.
So there's no point to the game. You can never win. You're going to constantly lose, and every option you have is one version of failure. You know, when I was depressed in real life, I got over it. It just took a while, right?
Yeah.
Like you eventually
That
burn
happens.
that emotion out. Your body says, buddy, you got to eat, okay? You got to interact with society. It's like, all right, fine. You get over it.
Yeah, it's possible to get over it.
Yeah. So
I think this is another sense of self-indulgence, where it's like, I'm depressed, I can never get over it, I'm the most victimized person in the world, and feel sorry for me, that sort of thing. I'm in this quagmire, this never-ending, this journey of depression that I don't have the will or want or need to get over because it gives me victim status.
that could be it. I mean, the writer could have been engrossed in their own emotions of helplessness, and everything felt bad, which is true. I mean, I felt rather helpless as well, but that I just saw as normal, and then you realize that's not normal. You're supposed to feel like depression is not feeling bad. It's almost like feeling nothing.
Yeah.
It's like like you have a lack of. You're not interested in eating. You're not interested in learning. You're just sort of going through your day, and nothing has meaning to you, and it's a very strange feeling.
It's a scary feeling, actually. It's pretty scary because nothing holds any value. There's no bright outlook. when you're in
Yeah,
that state of mind.
and the pain is more or less your stomach acids digesting yourself as opposed to feeling bad. It's just this nothing. So, yeah, I mean, there's definitely this feeling of just being constrained. So maybe that's the vibe that the writer was going with. I can get behind that, but again, without context and saying I didn't need a therapist. I didn't need this or that. It's like, okay, well, maybe this person does need a therapist. Is that a goal in the game? Is there like a schedule you have to follow? You have to go to the phone book and find one? Like it's it's any status indicator telling you of a negative reinforcement, like poison,
Yeah.
you're encumbered, whatever. It's like, oh, I got to solve that problem. That's a thing I know.
Yeah,
When
it's almost surreal.
when does that happen? How does that happen? And we were just going through the daily life of this person. You're like, do I care? Do I care? I don't care. I don't care. I don't care. Because there's four types of players. If we look at the chart, I can't remember the name of the chart. All my hardcore gamer guys show me. There's the explorer. There's the socialite. There's the goal-oriented fellow, and I can't remember the other one. But those are the four kinds of gamers there are in the world, and the types of games that facilitate that. So in this one, you're just sort of lore building. You're just sort of day in the life of, which is not a very effective method of storytelling if you're talking about genres. Slice of life is just the most notorious one, where the writer just rambles on and rambles on, and you're like,
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking for slice of life, you probably should go Japanese. They're really good at it.
they Haruki Murakami. You have to. It's an acquired taste. He does.
Yeah, I mean,
slice
A lot of
of
people
life.
don't really like slice of life.
Yeah, no, it's exactly yeah.
If you do like slice of life or you're interested in that sort of thing, I would probably point you in the direction of Japanese creators because they tend to be really good at it.
If we're talking about visual novels, yeah.
Yeah.
I wouldn't recommend Japanese actual novels because those are just they're not my tastes, but maybe they are for you.
It makes me feel like
And it's almost kind of surreal. that this game right here that we're looking at, the Zoe Quinn game, I believe this is the game that sparked Gamergate.
Right.
This was like the catalyst of Gamergate. So she started sleeping with journalists. People got mad because they found out, and there was a big uproar of gamers saying, "Hey, we want honesty in journalism." And then the journalist said, "No, we don't want to give you honesty in journalism." So they started demonizing gamers, and then it just sparked from there. And then Mundane Matt got flagged.
Yeah, no one really cares about Zoe Quinn. The thing with her is that she didn't deny it, and she kept it quiet, saying, "I'm not going to talk about my personal life." But if you're a person who uses their personal life to advance their professional life, then we've already crossed the boundary. So if they call you a slut, it's because you are. Not because they want to call you a bad name. It's like that's exactly what you are. So that's how I saw it. Again, I didn't really care because this is clearly a stupid game. Clearly.
Clearly this is a very stupid.
To even call it a game is hard enough.
I mean, if it were good, it would be good.
Yeah,
regardless of what genre it is.
There's plenty of Japanese dating games out there that are visual novels that are very regurgitative. They're very like, oh, this has been done before. But some of them, they're actually good dramas. They actually they focus on character dramas. So if you like it, you'll keep playing it. If you won't like it, you'll be like, the art sucks. There's not enough sex. There's not enough violence. Whatever. That's the point. So you have to know your genre. With this, what the hell is the genre of Depression Quest? It's a visual novel.
It's like modern art.
Modern thing. You're not going to find too many people interested in that.
If it's a slice of life, then it has to be a character that you're going along with. It has to be a character going through a story, going through their daily lives as a depressed person. But again, it would still be useful to see them before they became depressed. That we have a callback, so we can think of them before they were depressed. So we have that sort of tragedy. We could see how they were before. We just see them depressed, and we only have one standard to go by: their depressed selves, and it loses a lot of that drama.
Yeah. So anyone who actually plays this game and talks about how interesting it is and this and that, it's wow. I mean,
how brilliant it is.
I can give you dozens of short stories that involve the concept of depression and inner monologue and what have you.
Yeah, but exploring depression and suicidal thoughts is nothing new.
No.
In the realm of creativity, it is not novel at all. I mean, it might be a good work, might be a story these days involving someone who's depressed or something, or following their specific journey. But just exploring the idea itself is not something unique. It's something that has been done for a long time.
So I'm not saying that what she did was good or bad. I don't know, but it does not impress enough for me to care. So,
and according to what they're saying about it, it seems like they're.
Yeah.
Why I said that was because it seems to me that they're looking at Depression Quest as this unique novel game that it seems like the first game that came out that has the fortitude to explore depression. No, it's not by any means. So give me something else as to why it's good, other than it's about depression, or else I will not agree with you.
We're trying to argue for itch.io being this haven for experimental games. Yeah, it is. This is not one of them.
It might be experimental in some respects, but it's not good.
Yeah.
It's not a successful experiment.
If you're giving us a narrative with words, we're going to tear that apart. So,
yeah. If you give me a narrative of words, I'm going to judge it by how well the words are constructed and what kind of words you use and all that stuff. Don't toss it my direction. Let me tear it to pieces.
As nice as it would be for Depression Quest's legacy to be an innovative title that played with the tools of the medium, it won't...
I think the worst thing about the game is that there was no option to just go ahead, commit suicide, and end it.
Not sure if that bitch ever really had depression as much as she had that shit insanity.
That's a good point. If you never have a an option to commit suicide and end it, why not? That would be a really interesting thing because you would have you have to make the mental decision to end your life in that game. So there's no option for that in a game called Depression Quest. That's a really big tragedy of depression, kind of big thing you're leaving out there.
It would be nice to control a main character that then commits suicide and then take control of another character of the fallout of what happens.
Oh, that'd be excellent.
That'd
really
be
good.
interesting.
Like
Yeah.
multi-story sort of thing, and you only unlock the second person if you do decide to commit suicide. So that'd be really interesting.
Yeah, that would be a slice of life on another level. Yeah. I think that's a bit too creative though for Zoe Quinn. I'm just guessing. I'm guessing she didn't do that. So
I think it's just pure self-indulgence, and just want people to say, "Oh, here's my life. Here's how sad it is. Give me money."
That'd be 24/7.
More like play what isn't a game in the first place. Also, I don't use it dangle hair with electronics to teach me about depression.
It's been overshadowed by targeted harassment campaigns at its creator ever since it released.
no one's played it. No one cares.
Targeted harassment campaign. They always go to this targeted harassment campaign. It's always against these SJW types, even though there have been far more targeted harassment campaigns against anti-SJW types. People who, maybe not even anti-SJW types, people who just step against the norm or their narrative. They get barraged with these sorts of things, but you don't ever see them in the news. It's just someone has to have like blue hair to get in the news.
And then we heard that Zoe Quinn was a few weeks ago. Zoe Quinn got hired by Marvel.
And she's getting hired by Marvel. I mean, I don't really care. I mean, why not? They're going down in flames anyway.
She's got to make money somehow, right, people? So
yeah, they're hiring artists who are so lacking in talent that they had to put on a dress to get hired. So they are in a decline.
Go for it, Zoe. Good luck to you, sir or ma'am.
They say there is no way that this game got coverage and praise on its own merit. It's a textbook example of the war on objectivism. Anyone who says otherwise says they had a direct connection with this game, says that it helped them view their or others' depression in a new light, is participating in an effort to force untalented people and destructive ideas into gaming. Patrick Buchanan, living
What? Why? We transitioned to Patrick Buchanan? Okay.
Wow.
How do we go from Zoe Quinn to Pat Buchanan? I don't know.
Like maybe a little bit of a transition there would be a little helpful.
Whew. Nazism to some dude talking about his red color painting, and then Zoe Quinn and now Pat Buchanan. Okay.
Also, he's just demonizing all these people who are complaining about the game. They had legitimate complaints. Those were the legitimate complaints. Why don't I have the freedom? Why don't I have all the freedoms associated with depression? How come everyone who likes this game happens to also be directly connected with it? This doesn't seem like a very interesting game. They have all these complaints about it, and it's like if you ate something that was awful. Like if you ate McDonald's and you see like all these critics saying, "Oh, this new McDonald's burger is fantastic," and you know it's not fantastic because one, it's McDonald's, and two, you ate it, and you know it's not fantastic. So it's not. So there's something else there, and that's how Zoe Quinn got caught, because her game was obvious tripe. It was obvious junk, and all these people were praising it, and they say, "Oh, this is something that's not right here." Okay, this is junk, and all these people are praising it. If it had any sort of artistic merit, it wouldn't have gotten that sort of backlash. Probably would have had its detractors, of course, but it would also have its fan base that are not just corrupted by an ideology. It would have had its own fan base.
Yeah, there's a game I helped kickstart a few months back. It was very similar to this, text adventures or what have you, based on vampires, and very similar to Vampire the Masquerade, Bloodlines, but all choice based. Like everything's a choice, and it's just branching narratives. But it has visuals, it has audio cues, it has voice acting, and the artwork is not fully animated. It's just one little painting, and then another one pops up. But at least you're stimulating my eyes, you're stimulating my sense of language, and I'm making choices in this cool scenario that is not action-packed, that is not, running around with a gun. So there are stories out there that do it right, and we have that as a basis of comparison. So if Zoe Quinn comes up with a bunch of HTML links with images of Polaroids. It's like, what are you doing, honey?
Yeah, at least the image of Polaroid should make sense. Maybe the Polaroid could be the person you're talking to, but it's just a picture of a corner of a cell phone. I'm not really sure what that's supposed to mean to me.
It's try harder, Zoe.
Fossil. Wait, no, that says paleoconservative.
Oh, he's a fossil. So funny. Haha.
Proclaimed that much of modern art was barbarism. The precise word.
Yeah, that's what you said. Paul Joseph Watson was against barbarism.
Yeah, the brutalist movement.
Brutalist movement. There we go.
That's all he was really railing against. He's railing against the destruction of beauty.
Right.
In the modern art movements,
which is a classic Platonic view. The only example of that he says that people who can think what is good is bad is that they've been led astray and they have to be put back on the right path.
Yeah.
That's it.
Buchanan was speaking alongside Jesse Helms and was also attacking the National Endowment for the Arts, but he cut right to what he felt was the meat of the issue. Art like this barbarism, this dreck, was a direct result of the amorality and cowardice of art critics.
So, which art? What art
do
is
some nice stones there.
What art is he talking about?
I don't know. I think he's probably talking about the same art that the other conservative guy hated. The I forgot whatever it was he hated. This guy probably hates the same stuff.
I thought it was
these conservative guys tend to have the traditional aesthetic of the the nice. I want nice landscapes. I want nice looking people. That sort of thing. Traditional beauty.
I hope so, because the visual was a woman holding up a sign for election. And I was like, is that what he means? Propaganda is bad? Like, what?
The amorality and cowardice of art critics. I can see that point there if they're not doing their job of critiquing art. If they like saying, "Oh, I have this. You gave me this much money. I'm going to say this art is good."
Yeah,
that's kind of.
and again, we're talking. I'm can only connect this to Plato, in that he says that pleasurable art is good. So anything that's against that is bad, or is bad art.
That's pretty true and pretty accurate, because even if it's not aesthetically pleasing, if it stimulates the mind in some pleasurable way, like if it's an abstract piece and you can it gives you a journey into some sort of element of humanity or something like that. This makes you think on another level that you don't usually think on. Even if it's aesthetically and visually ugly, it's still pleasing. It's still pleasurable.
Yes,
in some respect.
There's like horror stories or depictions of violence that are ugly in content, but visually attractive.
Yeah,
because
in some way it's pleasurable.
Yes.
Brutalist art, it's not. It's not pleasurable at all. A lot of modern artwork is not really pleasurable on any level.
This is the heart of it, right here. This is the most naked form of attempting to control art.
No, it's not.
He's critiquing
it. Okay, when the Nazis put up an art gala of art they don't like, that's stupid, okay? That's not the height of controlling art. The height of controlling art is killing artists and burning their art. Okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the communists did that. I think that's what Joseph Stalin did. They killed a lot of these intellectuals and artists and then burned their works, destroyed them.
That would be the ultimate form, okay? Plato didn't...
You know what communism is, right?
Yes. Plato didn't even want that. Plato just says, we're going to fine you, we're going to get rid of your art, and we're going to excommunicate you. We're not going to, we're going to try and help you, but if you don't believe in the state, I'm sorry, but you can't be here, which is pretty offensive. I mean, compared to the First Amendment, where you're in America, you're free to do whatever you like or say whatever you like. But this is ancient times. This is like Plato's idealized society, which never came to be. So these ideas aren't alien, and they're not based off Nazism. And besides, the Nazis are doing something stupid here. It's just making people like this art. It's like,
hey, check out this art you're supposed to hate. Well, that's pretty good, actually.
as soon as you make something on the black market or something which illegal, guess what? There's going to be more of it. People want it. It's like, why is it illegal? When there's an adult section in the movie store back in the day,
Yeah, they want to go to that.
there's like, what's
Kids
there?
want to go
What's
there.
over there? What's adult video? Yeah, they want to know
It's a
that.
mystery.
It's mysterious. You give a stigma to something, and suddenly it becomes bigger than it used to be. Same with drugs, same with alcohol, same with adult content. So the Nazis doing this just goes to show you how dumb they were.
Yeah. You don't give, if you want to control art, control people's tastes and the aesthetic, you don't allow them to view the opposition. It's just, in fact, that's what the SJWs and the NBC crowd are doing now. If you create art that doesn't fall in line to what isn't approved by the narrative, they either try to destroy your career and destroy your life, or if they can't, if you go independent, they try to flag down all your campaigns.
Yeah.
And destroy any means of you producing that work.
Yeah, the best thing that the Nazis could have done in regards to art they didn't like was just ignore it. We're just like, it doesn't affect us. We don't care because we have our amazing message of whatever, and they have their own art. And that's what this should have been filled with all the Nazi paraphernalia of statuettes and strength and all that stuff. That's like, just ignore it. Who cares? Yeah. There's a bunch of weirdos, but we're the strongest, we're the best, yada yada. That's what would have been the height of, going against another message. Just drown it out with your own. Not putting it on display. Like, what the hell?
And when Buchanan yelled, "It's about ethics in video game journalism!" Wait, shit, sorry, no, that's not right. When Helms took the stand to say, Gone Home only got good review scores because they didn't want to be called homophobic. Wait, that's not it either. When people prescribe art to a specific set of qualities and attack everything that lays beyond those lines.
So you're saying those were not proper critiques? Like, first of all, that was the issue that sparked Gamergate. They wanted honesty, ethics, and video games journalism because there were no ethics at the moment. At least clearly they were tossing away their ethics in exchange for good reviews on people they liked rather than for the quality of the product they were reviewing. And second of all, yeah, that's the fact that people give good scores on things so they don't get called racist or homophobic. That's an actual thing in a society where if you are labeled homophobic, you may just end your career and you can never get rehired. You'll just end up in the gutter. It's a good possibility of that happening. So yeah, if you are to be called, if it's a choice between giving someone a good score or giving it a bad score and being called homophobic and possibly having your whole life burned down because of these weirdo leftist NPC people, then a lot of people will probably go with, I'm just going to give them a good score. Because I've seen a lot of people out there get tagged as racist or homophobic, and then they lose their job or they lose advertisers or what have you. It's a real thing. It's not a made-up critique. It's a real thing. It's a real problem.
Yeah, even with PewDiePie when he said the N-word, I believe, or...
Yeah, I mean, you're demonizing a gamer for using the N-word? I mean, come on. Have people not been on the internet before and playing competitive games?
Yeah, especially when he's talking about in this regard of you cannot objectively critique art. He didn't say objectively critique modern art. He just said art in general. It's like, wait a second, stop. Yes, you can.
You can. You can objectively critique art.
You get any artist or teacher who does this for a living. He's like, well, that's not the right method, or this technique is sloppy, or they didn't use enough this or that. It's like, yeah, because he knows what he's talking about. He knows how to actually do these things. And there's a wonderful series of videos of stuntmen and CGI men on YouTube that say this technique was done very well. This was shot so well. This what was the Old Boy movie? How they loved how the long shot of the one corridor they were going through, and the 2007 Spike Lee, how they just screwed it up because they didn't know what the hell they were doing. And they
The Old
showed
Boy movie is great, by the way.
the original, yeah.
Yeah, the original one is good.
Yeah, not the Spike Lee version. And they explain why. It's like, yeah, it's so obvious. It's like, yeah, because this guy's not suffering. He's not going through anything. He's just this white dude who's beating the shit out of everyone. And then he gets stabbed at the end, and you're like, what? Whereas the original scene with Old Boy, he gets stabbed. He's about to die. He gets back up. He starts fighting again. Like, holy crap.
Yeah, it's just a great movie. Anyone in the chat, I recommend the original Old Boy. If you want to watch a new one, fine, but I at least watch the original. At least watch the original.
Yeah, I mean, to understand the human condition is basic. And then to put that into an action movie is complicated. And to use proper cinematography and depictions of people going through hell, you can't just be a big, white, muscular, bald man beating off some guy in some sort of Streets of Rage game. You know, it's just like, this doesn't look believable. So, whew.
We have to understand what they're doing. Those qualities, they just so happen to perfectly align with the dominant cultural ideology, don't they? They're not.
No, they don't. Pat Buchanan was never a contender. He tried for president. He never won. Like,
Oh yeah, he never won.
if he did, maybe. But even then, you have to argue: are his views the dominant ideology of the time? I don't. Was it the '90s, the '80s, and '90s? I don't think so.
I think the '90s was the '90s anyway was a mix. It was a balance between leftist ideology and right wing ideology taking hold. There was a lot. There's strong. The right wing had a strong hold on some things. The left wing had a strong hold on some things. That's why a lot of people, when you ask people, ask Americans, when was a good time? When was a good time in our history, in recent history, where things felt okay and fine? They probably say the '90s, because there wasn't such a powerful divide. There wasn't such polarization at that time. I think at that time in the '90s in America, the pendulum was set just right, at least close to it anyway.
It's strange saying that about Pat Buchanan. He's kind of like the Trump of the '70s and '80s, but he was never elected. He's just saying what everyone was feeling at the time. But at the time in the '70s, it was always like the left-leaning people were always against war.
Oh yeah, the '70s was really strong leftists.
Yeah.
And I mean, they had good reason.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
mean, well, just to put it short, it was awful. It was awful. They had the left-leaning people, far leftists, had a really good reason to act the way they did, because there was some big problems happening in the country.
So a character like Buchanan wasn't exactly the most attractive, especially when you had Ronald Reagan coming up, who was just a senator. Or, sorry, was he a governor? I think he was a governor of his state. And got elected. Again, I was born in the 80s, so I don't know the whole story. But Buchanan was always just more of a philosopher than he was a politician. So not a big deal, not a big mover and shaker.
Yeah, I'm not sure if he represents the dominant view in America, because the dominant view in America changes a lot because leaders change a lot, leadership changes a lot, and so it's not the dominant view. This right-wing fundamentalism isn't the dominant view. It's a dominant view, you could argue, but it's not the dominant view.
There's multiple dominant views. That's true. Yeah, especially in America, where there's a cavalcade of opinions.
Oh yeah,
whereas
it's fantastic.
It's pretty wild. I tend to shut it off because there's too much politics on every news station.
Well, now it's politics, but it used to be a whole myriad of things. But now it's just been devolved into pretty much only politics.
Yeah. I'm so happy I don't have CNN anymore.
I think a lot of people share that sentiment. CNN is a bunch of lies. It came off. CNN actually lost a great deal of its viewership after Trump was declared innocent of all the RussiaGate nonsense.
Oh, that was yeah.
As a huge hoax.
Respect for the craft. They're not trying to uphold meaning. They're enforcing a hierarchy.
I don't know what he means by enforcing a hierarchy. And when you're talking about meaning, you're talking about understanding art, finding meaning in art. Like, how far do you take that? Like a hierarchy of what? Words? Ideas? Well, there's a hierarchy in words. There's a hierarchy in letters. Hierarchy in sentences. Then you have paragraphs. Then you have chapters. Then you have pages. Then you have books. That's a hierarchy. Like, what is he talking about?
I'm not sure exactly. Some of this you're trying to say doesn't make any sense. But I can relate to the fact that you should respect your craft. If you are a sculptor, respect the craft of sculpting. That is an important thing to do. I'm not sure. I think he's arguing against that, or he's mocking a politician for saying that you should be respecting the craft or something. But yeah, even Alan Moore, who is at best left wing and at worst a straight up anarchist, he tells you to respect the craft, respect those who came before you, respect the craft of this noble tradition.
Yeah, he wouldn't have said that while he was making Watchmen. Like all the stuff he says now about comic books. He wouldn't have said, superhero comics are for little babies as men or whatever he was talking about. It's like, he probably would have been published if he said that.
They're attempting to define a cultural narrative, and above all else, they're not talking about art.
Really? They're not talking about art?
But is he still quoting someone, or is this his opinion?
I think this is all his opinion. They're not talking about a cultural narrative, and they're not talking about art. It's like, okay, what are they talking about? What are you getting at, sir? What are they really doing then? Because that original guy was talking about the legality of funding the arts through the people, which is a constitutional argument. You can make that.
Yeah, that's the way artists should go. Because making any sort of deal with the government is making a deal with the devil. They will control you.
Yeah, and if you put a lot of money into a subsidy, you're going to get more of that thing, and the quality will always suffer. So, especially when you're talking about a government agency overseeing control, of course quality is going to suck compared to the private market. So, yeah, it would be great if all the private artists out there had their own patrons and they could do their own thing. And maybe there's an argument to be had that there should be funding for the arts and sciences by a government. But if that's all he was saying, then he could say all the stuff he hates about it because that's what it's producing. It's like, look what the government's doing. It's spending your tax dollars on this crap. It's like, oh yeah, I can see people getting angry over that. That happened to Canada. We spent $25 million on some stupid paintings that, very reminiscent of this. Could have been the same artist for all I know. Of squares and lines. It's like, thanks. Glad you guys spent all that money.
Hey everyone, thanks for making it to the end of this video. I know it was kind of meandering, a little off. Maybe this was my artistic decision to make it harder to watch than most of my videos. Regardless, if this is a topic that you, like me, just can't get enough of, there are a couple places you can start that I kind of based this video off of. The original inspiration for this was a podcast by 99% Invisible called The Many Deaths of a Painting that talks a lot about Bardet Newman and his art being vandalized and also his art being restored, which is really interesting in its own right. And the Nazi stuff came from a paper by Barbara Fisher called The Barbarism of Representation. You might have to have like a JSTOR subscription or something, but just tweet at me and I'll send you that. Like these academic gatekeeping walls are such bullshit. Anyway, the many talented voices you heard in this video belong to other YouTubers. Zach Frazier, returning star of the Wolfenstein video, was in here, as well as Games D and Chariot Rider. They all have their own channels, which I've linked. They're all great. They were great asshole art critics. I really appreciated it. And that's it. Thank you so much for staying till the end. As a reward, I will give you the real voice of Mark Rothko, which is one of the most badass things I've ever heard in my life. And that's it. Good night.
But I do know that many of those who are driven to this life are desperately searching for those pockets of silence where we can root and grow. We must all hope we find them.
Okay, I need a big abstract piece of art, which is the color red, for me to root and grow, because it's not quiet enough in my head. Okay.
That's what that means?
I guess so. Whew, okay, that was a trip. We went from fundamentalism and religion of the religious right to Nazism to some back.
Only right wingers hate the arts. You know, it's creative. It's the only people that are going to hate it are people on the right wing. No, left wing never has any history of hating anyone's art of any kind.
Yeah, I can only imagine what Plato's Socrates was opinion of the state was, and how they thought of him being a rebel. It's like, no, he totally, all his freedoms of expression and what have you. He was loved by the state. They just wanted him to die. Okay. Whew. Okay, well, that was interesting. I'm glad we went through that, because a lot of things we agreed with, because art expression and destruction of property. Some are good, some are bad, but you can totally judge things with actual standards, objectively. And a lot of people will say, well, those are subjective standards. It can never be objective. Well, I am a limited human being. That's true. I will not have a perfect standard with which to judge things like representative art, but I can make a list, and so can LiteratureDevil, and so can you. You can say, well, representative art has to look like something. It has to understand how color and balance and symmetry and perspective and light works, and that's how you go. That's how you start judging art, especially representative. Of course, it gets complicated when you talk about sound and moving pictures and interactive stuff like video games. There's all sorts of other variables to gauge, but you can do it. It's not impossible. It takes time, and it takes the critical eye. And I'm going to be working on my next objective video, which looks at quality, which I've been reading the Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance for, the third time in my life. And this is the perfect opportunity for me to get my thoughts down. What next video are you actually working on there, LiteratureDevil? I know you were talking about it before the video.
It was the Western versus Eastern storytelling video. It's getting the visuals together, but due to my lazy editing, it's taking a little while.
Okay.
Awesome. Because I apparently have lazy editing, so this takes a while still. But it turned out to be like 30 minutes long, and it's going to take it's still probably barely scratching the surface. But I will be preparing for the onslaught of the inevitable. Well, actually, and what about this people? But it was a lot of fun, and it should be a lot of fun for at least some people.
That sounds cool. I mean, there's always a nice way to learn about, well, any topic really on YouTube these days, but specifically art appreciation, art critique and analysis, whatever angle you choose. Always good to hear your opinion on those things. So thanks, guys, for staying this late. I know it's got work tomorrow, got school tomorrow, or whatever your lifestyle is these days during the summertime. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And we'll talk to you soon. Good night.
Good night, everyone.